A corpse kneels beside a well. Mesmerized by the reflection of its living flesh, it wonders what could have been done, and could have been, and for as long as the moon shines, the feeble illusion will prevail. This is the opening of Vermis. Fantasy is my favourite genre of storytelling. I will expand on my reasons within the video, but what I will say for now is that the infinite possibility it brings gives way to the depths of the human mind, or, should I say, the greatest parts of it. From the early childlike interpretations of mythology and history to the most depraved settings imaginable, I truly think fantasy is the most varied and accessible genre out there. I mean, I even wrote a thesis relating to it for my university degree, as useless as it is. A hard truth though is that fantasy as a genre has become oversaturated with the same old high fantasy. The same cheap series or the same sort of fantasy inspired by modern Dungeons and Dragons, for example. I have nothing against modern D&D, I mean I am a DM myself, but it is undoubtedly more stale than it used to be in its presentation when it comes to the official content and artistry. So what exactly is fantasy? Many people often conflate sci-fi and fantasy, but arguably they are quite different. Sci-fi is simply what can be possible with science with enough time, whilst fantasy is simply using connotations of things that simply cannot occur in the real world, as far as we know. Of course, sci-fi fantasy exists too, being the use of both genres at the same time, but that is beside my point. All of this to say that despite the growing homogenization of this great genre, there exist genuine works of art that incorporate real-world inspirations alongside masterful illustrations and world-building that is unlike many things within the genre. Vermis. This video is the second part in my Plasterbu duology that I've established on this channel. Previously, I covered Godhusk, the gothic sci-fi setting Plasterbu wrote, and due to many requests, and the massive support that video got, I am deciding to cover Vermis, his original work within this genre. You do not need to watch my Godhusk video to understand this one, as the two settings and games are completely separate, but of course feel free to do so anyway if you want to better familiarise yourself with Plasterbu's works. A few things that I want to mention before we start though. At the time of writing, there exist two Vermis books. They are simply titled Vermis I, Lost Dungeons and Forbidden Woods, and Vermis II, Mist and Mirrors. There are whispers of a potential upcoming third part, but just know, as of this video's creation, I am covering these two books because, well, they are the only Vermis books out at this moment in time. Despite this, the books give a very in-depth and complete experience. Please be sure to support Vermis by buying a copy if you are interested. The link to do so is in the description. There is even an official soundtrack that was made by Radagast, which will sometimes play in the video. The link for this as well is in the description, alongside the other music that I've used. This video, like my Godhusk video, is not sponsored and is purely me just talking about something that I really love, which is, well, the premise of this entire channel. Lastly, unlike my Godhusk video, this one is in widescreen, 16:9. The reason for this is that I want both projects to feel ultimately different in presentation, and one of the few ways I'm doing so is by doing that. Some people no doubt would be asking why I did this, so there you go. The reason that video was in that aspect ratio was because, well, the games that would have released at the time Godhusk released would have been in the same resolution. However, by 1997, widescreen began to become a norm within games. Vermis also focuses a little less on gameplay than Godhusk does, so we are more free to presume some things such as the resolution and presentation. Godhusk is outright defined as a Metroidvania, which were popular in the 80s and 90s. Vermis, however, doesn't have a locked genre besides, well, an RPG. We don't know if it's top-down, third-person, isometric, first-person, or anything like that, but more on that in the expanded analysis. So, what is Vermis? Vermis is a dark fantasy rule and lore book for a game that doesn't exist. The first Vermis book is the first work of Plasterbu, and the second Vermis book eventually followed. By the point of Vermis' creation and publication though, Plastibu had established themselves as a very capable artist. Whilst Godhusk is filled with depressive yet beautiful imagery and an incredible story, I believe Vermis is the king of atmosphere and immersion, and is the genuine peak of Plastibu's work in many regards. Just like in my Godhusk project, despite the detail I will go into, coming up with your own interpretations and supporting the official release is important, so again, please be sure to check the book out for yourself if you can. I promise that you will get more out of the book if you have it in your own hands. Alright, let's begin. This is Vermis. After the initial text that I read out at the very start of the video, we are greeted with two simple lines. One a statement, another a question. A light sparks in the dark. Which flesh is your flesh? Sticking to the topic of flesh, the next page goes into detail regarding the two distinct kinds of flesh. Good and evil. Good flesh is seemingly compared to light, unable to be invaded by darkness and shining in the darkest corners of the world. Evil, meanwhile, is conflated with darkness, which is described to be eternal, infinite, and unrelenting. The text says that, quote, "We are born in the light and rot in the dark," end quote. Whether this is referring to humans or not isn't clear at this point. To me, these are the two distinct types of characters in Vermis 1. The skeleton character somehow seems to be the player character, and after observing its own fall into the darkness of the well, the player must choose between these two options. After this we get a guide on the states of Vermis. There are 9 states, and they are compared to wounds that are more grievous than others. These wounds no doubt lead to these states: infection, dread, slumber, petrification, curse, insanity, blindness, possession, and white hives. I will explain as much as I can how these work as we go, but some should be obvious, such as blindness and petrification. On certain pages we see the icons for certain states, signifying what the area or enemy may inflict upon us. From here we can choose a class, origin point, or whatever you wish to call it. There are a total of 12 of these, and each one has their own little backstory that is vague enough for the player to come up with or write their own character within the boundaries of Vermis. As well as this, we get a look into their stats. There are 4 stats in Vermis: strength, intelligence, faith, and will. We also see their starting items, as well as how much good and evil flesh they have via a black and white orb, with the good represented as white and evil as black. Allow me to quickly go over the classes. Mad Pricker. Their origins are yet unknown. Some say they are some kind of cult, others say they are mindless minions to an evil god. They have armor full of deadly and infected spikes. Their handcuffs don't allow them to hold any weapons. Rumour has it that their helmets are actually full of spikes on the inside, so they may not be chaotic and hostile for the sake of it. Instead, they are desperately seeking help in a constant torture. The Lost Old Glory. Once a hero, now a lost soul without purpose in life. Where are their beloved ones, the people they once fought for? They stood against many indescribable horrors, but always came back. Trapped in their memories, not able to process the past, the Old Glory wanders through the dark woods and forgotten villages, trying to find purpose in life. The Waste of Life. Expelled from every village and hated by everyone. He's been cursed multiple times and has committed many crimes, but he shows no remorse. Some say that this individual is not human at all, but the embodiment of all of our flaws. Every single action is driven by its madness and greed. They have escaped punishment many times, but have never learned a lesson. The Merc Sage. They have incredible mind-twisting powers. They can create all kinds of illusions and play with their enemy's mind. The big metal head works as a catalyst for their powers. They are completely defenseless in the daylight. Merc Sages are the masters of illusory arts, bending shadows to create all kinds of nightmares. When the darkness is gone, their power shrinks greatly. They can survive with the little darkness inside their helmets, but without shadows they are defenseless. They cast spells with their crucier, swinging it left to right whilst chanting, causing them to be vulnerable for some time. Shadows are typically useful for the Merc Sage because of this, as the illusions are most effective when enemies don't know where they are coming from. Even if they know an illusion isn't real, sometimes it doesn't make them any less horrifying. The Wandering Angel. These devoted knights are on a journey to join their beloved goddess in death. They have to travel all the way to a sacred mountain, and then pull the halo placed behind their helmets to decapitate themselves. A pile of helmets full of rotten flesh lies on the other side of the mountain. The Stone Scholar. They have their face compressed against the stones tied to their heads. In constant pain, but that sacrifice grants them infinite wisdom. They are experts in mud sorcery and are very smart, but have a fragile body. They are condemned to a pitiful and miserable life, unable to see or smell, due to the scars the rocks have left them. Should they be stripped of their power somehow, they will only crawl to search the enlightenment they once had. The Princess's Nail. Their loyalty knows no limits. They are all their princess needs to achieve anything she wishes. Whether that be the death of her enemies, unattainable treasures, peace or war. They will stop at nothing. The princess herself ties a lock of her hair to her knight swords, so they can feel her presence and love within them in every battle. The Infant Seeker. A mother on a quest to retrieve her last child, taken from her by a witch. On these lands the young children disappear often, the birth rate is very low, and witches are in constant search for the precious delicacy. Memories of better days is her main source of determination, and no matter how long or arduous the journey is, hope will remain. The Rat Man. Once a man afflicted by a curse. With time he ended up losing his humanity. No memories of the man he once was remains. He's been wandering in the capital sewers for so many years that he has become a sort of fable to scare children. The Miner Knight. These knights are born and raised in the pestilent mines that granted them a very high tolerance to toxins and sicknesses. Their senses developed greatly. They can hear, smell and see almost like a creature of the night. The mines were once a place that provided many materials to the capital and those who wanted knowledge of the old world. Prophet. The last member of a religion that was persecuted and eradicated by the crown. They worshipped the old world god known as Marco, titled the Oracle, who granted them countless miracles and showed them grim prophecies of a dark future. Marco was decapitated long ago, yet his mummified head can talk to those who know how to listen to him. These grim prophecies of the future were full of death and decay. The Cursed Fool. A brave warrior who faced a terrible loss. He found a mysterious whispering rock that told him the way to bring back his loved one from the dead. Since then he has been a slave to the Whispers. This rock are the remains of an ancient statue, its edges polished by the hands of those who have handled it with mistrust. The rumours say that the Whispers guide the holder to achieve their deepest desires, yet many also say that those who listen are fools. Cursed fools, that is. Choosing an origin, we are told about the 6 known gods of this world. They demand devotion, punishment, or sacrifice. Some are said to be older than time, whilst others have a physical form or are completely invisible. They all shaped the world into what it is. Gailac the Cursed, Dorvis the Truth, Mergo the Relentless, Gervek the Great, Marco the Oracle, and Ketereth the Wrath. They will be expanded on as we venture. With our character created, we are told about an area. This is Greengrave, also known as the Dead Man's Garden. It is filled with lush green yet has an underlying depression about it thanks to the thin fog. The apparent remains of Gervek the Great have grown alongside the mountains here. The remains of a literal god. These remains are now one of the relics of the old world and is considered sacred by many, as it is said that those who live in Greengrave live longer due to this relic. Greengrave lies in the outskirts of the capital. The capital itself is said to be consumed by chaos and is in a constant war headed by fools and liars, blinded by the shining of their own crowns. Each of these fools thinks their cause is supreme, and they think each sacrifice brings them closer to the death of their enemies. Luckily for us, our journey is far from this war, beginning deep in Greengrave's forest. We awake in a small, isolated crypt within the forest. It is cold and damp, but at least it feels comfortable. Moving past the comfort, we enter the graveyard. The book here gives us a small poem. House of grey, house of cold, house of 1,000 doors, house of many, house of none, house of those no longer home. We also get a look at some of the threats in this area, or should I say, monstrosities. Crazy Bones, Mad Bones, Talking Skull, Insane Bones, Witch Head, Shadow Figure, Bone Keeper, Ghost Mother and her newborn, Mudman, Bone Snake, Living Grave and the Lonely Knight. Unlike Godhusk, which came after Vermis, Vermis often leaves the details of enemies to interpretation, but gives us a good look at them. What we do gather here is that the Witch Head is defenceless when their tongue is cut off. Venturing enough, we may find whistling death inside an open coffin, gripped tightly by its former owner. It is a unique sword that has a distinct sound when it is swung through the air. Leading to the higher level of the graveyard are two clothed statues standing next to the ascending stairs. As we reach the summit, we hear the piercing noise of cold wind. Looking ahead, we see the majestic view of the whole graveyard within the valley, but we also feel a presence. Art thou among the living? If so, this is not a place for thee. The Lonely Knight was defeated long ago. He mourns endlessly, and this longing for someone who has passed is what led to his defeat. His path has been crooked since the day he lost his other half, and despite his imposing appearance, he is totally harmless, not even defending himself should we attack. Me? I don't think that should concern a stranger in the least. I am just offering my company to a fellow. The Lonely Knight crouches at the side of a knight upon a slab of stone, his hand on their upper chest plate. Progressing, we come across a salient with 6 tombs. Moving one to the side, we find a secret path to the catacombs. This path is dangerous, and there are fierce enemies lurking on and around it, most of which aren't among the living. Sneaking, killing, or rushing by the enemies will eventually lead to the Pauper's Catacombs. Pauper meaning, well, a poor person. It is filled with corpses of those who are not remembered, such as forgotten warriors, disgraced nobles, and lowly peasants. The walls are filled with bones that are upon bones. The pitch-dark corridors are constantly leaking from the wet soil above, and the air is dense with a smell of rot. Within one of the intersections of the catacombs is a statue of a mother, with exposed ribs and a void that acts as a womb and a stomach. Her upper head is missing. At her feet is the following inscription. Our caring mother guides us through the dark. Her lips speak sweet tender words and her gaze reflects our own. Within the catacombs is a half skull that can be placed on the statue's head. This will reveal a passage that leads to a treasure room. The chest that hides the half skull will be in a large room at the end of a hallway, guarded by mad bones. At the bottom of the room lies an open sarcophagus, in front of which appears to be 7 skeletal figures made of stone. Inside this sarcophagus is a bone crusher, a relic that takes the shape of an axe made of bone. The tales say that the warriors who wielded weapons made of bone eventually submitted to them, merging their flesh and bones to become one with the weapon. There are only 2 of these items in the world. Should we take it, the skeletal figures I spoke of will come to life and attack. The question is it worth it? These statues move slowly when their prey isn't looking at them, but if our gaze happens to be elsewhere, then they will move towards us with no sound at all, despite their size and weight. Should they get their hands on us, we will be crushed in a matter of seconds. These catacombs are described to be a labyrinth, made of complicated tunnels with similar and twisting paths that all look the same. In every corner there may be a threat, and the shadows feel almost alive as they dance in the corner of our eyes. Huddled in the corner of these halls is a shivering and muttering knight in dark green armour. His armour is ornate and spotless, almost as if he hasn't faced any opponents in battle before. His helmet is in the shape of a frog, his hands clinging on each side of it in fear.
Oh, the gods, please help me. The horror. I can't look at them. Rotten. Dismembered. Torn to shreds and yet standing up. Looking at me. Please go away. I can't help you. Stop this madness.
Coming back to this spot after some time, we will see that the frightened Frog Knight is dead in the same corner. He was never ready for the horrors of the dark. On his body, we find a ring of 1,000 eyes, allowing us to see those who are no longer among the living, whilst also allowing us to be seen by them. We can also loot his armour, known as Exiled Sentinel armour. It is heavy and from a faraway land, full of ornaments and painted in a green with bronze details. A piece of written cloth is stored inside one of his gauntlets. It simply says, "Do not dare return without a cure." From this cloth alone we know why this knight was here. A poor victim of either an accidental curse or something else. Either way, he was filled with fear and maybe, just maybe, guilt. Perhaps his ring could be blamed for this too, being able to see those who are no longer among the living. Eventually, and sadly, his bones will be added to the many in these catacombs. With enough effort, we may find the exit to this place at the end of a long tunnel. This tunnel is silent, having no doors or corners, with only the floor full of rotting bodies and bones to occupy us. A respite from what came before. The pleasing cold breeze complements this feeling, which, well, slightly alleviates the odour. Getting closer to the end, the corpses on the floor will twitch and convulse, forming into a nightmarish shadow ahead of us. This is the Stench Champion. The remains move in a strangely human way, mimicking the warrior they once were, maybe unconscious of their new body. The smell from the champion is unbearable, and if we choose to fight it, we must hold our breath or change position until the breeze from the exit is helping us. Defeating the nightmare, we push ahead to the exit. What greets us is the Silver Swamp outskirts. The exit from the catacombs is some meters off the ground on the side of a small cliff. We can drop down on the pearly waters. The calm is almost haunting here, as is the thick veil of mist. The fog makes only a flat landscape covered in cloudy waters and weeping willows discernible. Pressing on, the air gets warmer and more gentle, like a summer breeze. We feel the water soaking our feet. It's hard to distinguish due to the water being slightly warmer than our body temperature. Soon we see a distant figure resting below a tree.
"Over here, friend. I did not expect to find anyone in a place such as this. However, I must warn you about the swamp. It might look like a quiet, peaceful landscape to wander through, but it is far from that, I'm afraid. Once you enter the mist, well, there's no way out. You might get lost, or worse, you might fall asleep, which means certain death. Witchcraft, I assume, but if you need a place to rest your bones, this is the perfect spot. Close enough to enjoy the bait without falling into the trap. But if what you desire is among those enchanted waters, I will not hold you back."
The drowsy knight then hands over a Night Watch mushroom, commonly used by the night guards to stay awake, may be helpful in these swamps. Crossing the mist, the atmosphere fills with a violent silence. The only sounds we hear are our own feet sloshing through the water, our bodies getting tired and eyelids heavier. We must be careful that the slumber state doesn't take form. This swamp is a land of illusions and apparitions. The ghosts of the ones who never came back from the mist are now damned to wander this place forever. The ghosts are known as the Phantom Parade, and there are a total of 12 of them that can appear. For example, the old man smiles and giggles silently, covered in black. The tall figure simply stands ominously, staring. The damsel has a sorrowful look and stands at a distance. The hag uses her hood to hide a solemn expression, accompanied by a small beast. The hiding man hides behind a tree, naked and emanating a threatening aura. The vomiting woman is a young woman who, well, vomits violently whilst moaning in agony. She is naked and leans on the ground. The fanatic wears a kind of ceremonial robe, covered with a mask with jewels on his eyes. The final example is the corpse, lying on the water wearing a chainmail, full of dry blood and wounds. After what feels like hours of walking, there is nothing. No change, not even a traveller or a structure. A unique ghost here is the shadow figure. When nearby, its prey will feel a pressure in their chest, but if they hear a piercing scream that belongs to the figure, it's too late, and dread will fill their body. As the book says, inside the mist your ears hear nothing but your footsteps, but your eyes can distinguish subtle silhouettes slowly moving around you. If you walk towards them to find out who's behind the fog, you will find nothing but a whisper. Do not turn your back on the shadows. Another threat is the emerging visage. The visage of an old man that slowly emerges from the water in complete silence. His eyes are hollow like a mask, and his jaw is detached from his head, only being held in place by a poorly managed tie made from his beard. Upon appearing, we hear a voice in our heads, everlasting shadows cast by fibbing fires, rotting beds with silver sheets, a sanctum for the cold. Our eyes are backwards. After these words are whispered, the visage simply vanishes into the fog. So, that mushroom the drowsy knight gave us will eventually need to be used. The longer we stay here, the harder the fight against drowsiness becomes. Eating the mushroom helps us stay conscious for a little longer, or we can simply pinch ourselves, which I doubt will be very effective. Pressing on, we will find a shadow standing in our soaked path. This one isn't like the others, as we hear footsteps and armour behind it.
My path is written, my sword is unbreakable. Be gone, shadow. Return to the fog. You won't fool me twice.
This exhausted and lost paladin will attempt to strike us down, but the weight of his armour and his slumber will cause him to fall into the swamp with a great splash. Gaining enough strength to talk and look up at us, he asks us, "Why is my armour so heavy?" before falling completely into the silvery water. We can either kill him or steal his blade. This blade is called the Unbreakable Path, and it shines in various colours like oil. Fortunately, it is oddly light for its size. Eventually, not even pinching will help us, and we will fall into brief moments of sleep with tumbles and nodding to match. It gets to a point where we can't tell if we are even progressing. Once we fall to the ground, anger boils inside us, defeated as if the long fight was over, and now we have to wait for a certain death. As we nod off, we get a bit of exposition. The birthplace of the curse is a forsaken labyrinth plagued with abominations and pure horror. Only the mad and accursed can freely wander around the pestilent tunnels. The stench is unbearable, and every shadow hides a blood-starved monstrosity. The mines hide secrets that should remain unknown for the good of mankind. As for what this curse isn't exactly clear at this point. It could somehow be referring to the sleepiness that is found here in the swamps. As we drifted in our sleep within the swamp, we awake within the dream, a haunting scene. The mist is completely gone, and so are the trees. The sky is pitch dark with only the crescent moon reflecting off the water. Looking down, though, we notice that the bottom of the water is made completely of corpses. They crunch with every step we make. We are told the following. None have awakened from the dream. Resist not, and your flesh shall be banished, so your soul can rest under the peaceful waters among many others. Venturing enough, we will come across the aspect of the dream. It gracefully draws its blade and swings at inhuman speeds, with the only time to fight back being between these onslaughts. Luckily, its nimbleness gives way to fragility, meaning that one hit is all that is needed to disperse it. It is a quite challenging task either way, thanks to its speed. If the aspect's weapon touches us, the dream will end instantly, as will our life. Our body will never be found in the mist, at least not in a physical form. Awakening, we find ourselves in a completely different place. The mist is gone, and the sounds of nature surrounds us. We start to feel the cold breeze against our soaked clothes. Next to us, we find the memory of the Stinger, a blade previously owned by the aspect of the dream that we defeated. Walking from the scarce amount of water we awoke in, we see a slender, thin, masked man standing on the shore, staring our way. They wear a big cloak and hold a wooden mask to their face, peeking through it as they do.
Now I've seen it all. What a peculiar scene I am witnessing. You surely are one of a kind. Not only did you survive, but you somehow vanished the fog. I happened to be looking for someone.
I thought it was you for a second, then the mist suddenly dissipated. I've been entrusted to deliver an important message. I'm afraid I have no time to waste. You're quite an interesting fellow. Hopefully we won't meet again. May Dorvis guide your way. The man then turns around and ventures into the swamp, leaving us behind. Finally making our way out of the swamp is a hillock. Atop it is a startling view of the whole Flutewood forest. This landscape is filled with distant whistling, making us wonder about the nature of this world. We go down the hill, ready to face whatever denizens are within it. The trees here can grow up to 70 meters tall, and their trunks are full of holes on every side, causing flute-like noises to occur when the wind blows through the forest, hence the name of the forest. At night, the whole forest erupts into a spine-chilling melody that is so loud that even the bravest will be frightened. Around the world are stone-like structures known as Vagrant's Crown. On each of the 4 sides are different expressions, but the erosion and time has made most of them unrecognisable. Those who respect the monuments leave a string of their hair and clothes tied to it, so those who come often can tell how many had ventured into the lands they are about to step foot in. To be shady as a bold crown is a common saying, referring to how a vagrant's crown without any hair or clothes means that the land ahead is dubious and dangerous, that shouldn't be trusted. Murgo the Relentless, one of the gods, has devotees consecrated to protect holy terrain and destroy possible threats. They live in Murgo's grace, ripping their guts out and causing lethal wounds to themselves, just to prove their trust and witness the miracle. Their life will continue as long as they are faithful to their god. Shrines to Murgo can be found scattered throughout these woods, with offerings such as seeds, berries and flesh at the bottom of them. It is known that every spark of non-human life has grown from one of Murgo's several limbs. He is described to be the father of everything that is green. The trees always grow tall around these shrines. There are many threats in the Flutewood, 15 types to be precise, which are being panned over on the screen right now. This place is full of life and death, and its reputation comes not only from being the witch's homeland, but also for the little knowledge man has of it. The brave souls who venture into the woods don't usually come back to tell. Deep in the woods is a house without windows, seemingly a perfect place to rest. We notice a small fireplace and a couple of rotten sacks of flour alongside bedsheets. Everything is covered in dust and we feel the dampness in the air. Once we close the door, everything inside turns completely dark and we can finally get a peaceful rest. The only sound inside being the distant whispers of wind coming from the fireplace. We dream of lost ancient lands we have never seen, brimming with life and full of serenity. A clear sky mirrors on the crystalline waters. The mist from the distant waterfall dampens our skin. The lingering water shines like diamond dust in the air. We find comfort in the soothing view. We wake up soaked in sweat. A dazzling fire lights the whole room from the fireplace, and the pressure in the air feels overwhelming. The muffled sounds slowly turn into deep guttural voices, violently chanting in a language we cannot understand. It's like living in a nightmare. Our heart is racing. Confused and frightened, we cannot process the situation, so we quickly run to the door. Our legs tremble in fear as we try to stand up. Passing by the fireplace, we realize something truly bizarre. Despite the light from the fireplace, we cast no shadow. The chanting gets louder, and we feel more debilitated, as if every word is putting more weight on our shoulders. Listening to this chanting for too long will cause us to become cursed. A fate supposedly waits that is worse than death, and we will carry it for the rest of our life. A punishment yet unworthy of thy sin, said Marco before inflicting the eternal curse upon Gailak. Trying to escape the curse, we run to the door, but it is closed tight. The rotten and humid wood eventually gives way as we knock it down. We fall to the ground outside, alongside the door, breathing in the air as we feel the wet grass underneath our fingertips, and the forest's breeze chilling the sweat on our back. Relief. Looking back at the room, a small shine in the fireplace catches our eye. Upon closer inspection, we realise the ashes are cold and the spiderwebs and dust inside the fireplace make it known that it was never lit at all. The shining object is a red ring. Picking it up, we notice how it's attached to something buried in the ashes. A mummified severed hand that is missing the tip of a finger. we can take the ring with us if we wish. This is the Ring of the Singing Fire. The bearer of it will be able to add burning flames upon a weapon upon touching the steel. The effect only lasts for a minute, and it cannot be applied again until the steel cools down. As we interact with the chimney, though, we notice a strong smell coming from within it. Don't look up. Now, somehow rested, we can continue our venture. 2 nights north, we notice that the path is frequented by small ruins covered in moss. The deeper into the woods we go, we notice these small ruins become large towers and castles conquered by nature. Looking around these ruins, we find nothing but mossy bricks. These ruins are as old as the forest itself. Everything has been consumed by nature. The one ruin that stands out here is an imposing mausoleum. As we get closer, we will be able to discern noises coming from inside, in between the forest's whistles. These are the Green Sun Ruins. These ruins have 5 levels total, and we also get a bit of a story. A long time ago, the Goblin Princess's life slowly faded away due to a rare illness, and so did the Green Hand Order. The Green Sun Mausoleum was built shortly afterwards to preserve and venerate the body of the princess. Very few goblins remain from the old world. Even so, they still guard the beloved corpse. On each of the 5 levels of this ruin is an enemy. On the first level is a necromancer, a dark-stricken creature that hides behind his many summons made of bones. The second level has a Hemlet beast, a starving monster that has remained here for years, constantly thirsting for blood, resting on a nest of bones from those who once fell to it. On the third floor is the Light Gobbler, a twisted abomination full of limbs. A single look into their contorted face can make lesser beings go mad. The fourth level has a few goblin guards that guard the ruin. On the 5th and final level lurks a Goblin Knight, the last of his kind, awaiting next to the aforementioned Goblin Princess's chamber, bound by his oath. As we approach these ruins, we hear a distant grunting. Checking it out, we find a knight lying below a tree, holding his hands on his stomach while blood pours out.
I guess I'm not going to die alone. Well, that's a relief. It's funny how even a stranger can bring solace when someone is consumed by despair. I'm not the first one who will not come back from these woods. Nevertheless, I thought it would be different for me. I have sinned of impertinence. Would you do me a favour? Bring me the box.
He points to a small entrance on the side of the ruins. This box can be found deep in the ruin, and we will get back to it in a moment. The main gate to the ruins themselves are guarded by a big red skeleton, equipped with a sword and shield. The floor around him is crimson with blood. Red skeletons are stronger and bigger than the Mad Bones, but luckily there are other ways to enter the ruins if we look around hard enough. Entering the building, we see a horde of skeletons surrounding a tall hooded figure with glowing blue eyes. A necromancer. It notices us instantly, slowly raising its hand while stepping back. A skeletal body raises from the ground, trying to reach our leg. To defeat this foe, we must avoid fighting the skeletons, instead focusing on the necromancer. Defeating the necromancer leaves only a single horned helmet in its place, as the summoned skeletons return to their natural state. The Princess of Bones is the name of this ceremonial helmet. It does not grant us any special attributes whilst we are alive, besides changing the colour of our eyes to blue. Should we die with this helmet on though, we will return to life as a necromancer. At the back of the room is an ivory chest at the feet of a dilapidated statue. It is perfectly preserved and covered in many ornaments, likely housing a valuable object. Approaching the chest, we feel our heart drop as the floor begins to open beneath our feet. Our fingers slip off the edge of the hole as we fall helplessly into the void. This, however, is the only way to access the underground chambers, an area that advances our journey. This mistake may not be totally bad after all. A bed of slimy bones breaks the fall and the stink of death instantly clouds our senses. Ahead, in the dark, are a pair of yellow glowing eyes that cast a flimsy light on the macabre surroundings. A ferocious beast stands ahead of us. To defeat it, we must avoid looking directly at its eyes or risk petrification, leading to a slow death that we cannot defend against. A certain glimmer can be found among the rusted weapons and armours that once belonged to the beast's victims. The Shield of Truth. A blue shield with a big shiny gem at its centre. Wiping the blood off the surface, we see our own reflection, and using it against the beast will lead to its own petrification as it looks upon itself. Making our way out, we find ourselves in a dark room with a beam of light coming from the trapdoor on the ceiling. We hear noises and murmurs from the shadows. There are goblins nearby, staring at us, shocked to see someone coming out of the pit. They are paralysed with fear. Weak and old, none will dare face the warrior who slayed the beast. We may walk in the next room with our blade covered in their blood if we wish. Next we will find a small room connected to a long hallway full of arches. Once we step into the room, a glowing object at the bottom of the room instantly catches our eye. A chest with an ominous deep green aura. Approaching the chest, we see a light gobbler behind it, using its mouth to emit the green glow of the chest to lure us. Getting too close causes the lights to turn violent, confusing and frightening us, soon turning us insane if we don't look away. The light gobbler moves extremely fast, resembling an insect. Finding a way to loot the chest results in the royal spine, a beautiful but ultimately heavy and near useless rapier. A long corridor awaits us. The long ruined structure lets the sunlight peek through the walls and floor, casting its light into the deep green moss. A delicate voice echoes between the walls of the corridor.
Please, leave them be. This is not a place for thy kind. Be gone, I beg.
The corridor leads to a large room. In the middle is a threatening presence, the Goblin Knight. Their odd-looking armour presents the main traits of a goblin, but it doesn't match his imposing stature. He carries a pair of wavy war axes. As soon as he notices our presence, he starts to walk towards us. This formidable foe fights slowly, but is extremely aggressive. If we carefully avoid or block his attacks for some time, we will eventually exhaust him, enough to a point that it gives us a chance to thrust our weapon into one of the armour's apertures. He will then fall to his knees. As this happens, he turns his head to a dark hallway at the end of the room. He contemplates it for a few seconds, then screams at the top of his lungs and rises once again. The blood pours from his wounds like a fountain due to the pressure. He is going berserk. He won't last long, yet he fights faster and until the very end, but eventually the battle must end. The knight falls into a puddle of blood and stops moving almost immediately, as if he's been drained from every grain of energy. We cannot take his armour or his axes with us due to their weight, but we can remove the upper half of his helmet. He was in fact human after all. The ruins are in absolute silence, and the last room awaits. We stare into the darkness, our eyes eventually discerning a dim light at the end, probably from the cracks on the ceiling as well. We can feel the tension in the air as we walk through the hallway. It feels somehow wrong, but also like the right thing to do. We feel a pressure in our chest, a feeling we cannot fully grasp. The princess slumbers in her casket peacefully. No one should ever disturb the graceful damsel, only those whose hearts left their body long ago. We move the top of the casket off. The princess remembers better times, and she has been stripped away from her most beloved possessions. She thinks of the goblins and her father. We can take the two relics from the princess. A rusted old crown that once had embedded gems on it, and a highly decorated bronze box. It has an inscription in a language unknown to us, and is closed very tight. Once we exit the chamber, we witness an uncanny scene. A pale woman with a sad expression kneels before the Goblin Knight's corpse. Her skin is lumpy and full of wounds, and her hair floats as if she were underwater. The vision lasts for barely a second before fading. Going back to the tree with the dying knight, we can give him the bronze box.
I cannot believe my eyes. Thank you, you are a saint.
He grabs the box nervously, pulling a key from one of his pockets that opens it. Inside there's a shiny green ring. The knight holds it tight, and suddenly he bursts into flames, only leaving ashes. We can instead keep the box.
Oh, I see. I should have expected it. Too much to ask of a stranger.
If at some point we force it open, the box will be completely empty. I can only guess that if we kill the man on our own, retrieve his key, and get the ring from the box, well, Our fate won't be very pleasant. Okay, let's move on from this place. In this world exist 6 immortal blades, swords that took part in tales and legends. Their blades are one of a king and also indestructible due to the magic that forged them. Each one has special abilities that are unique to them. Some of these blades have taken lives from demons and emperors across time, and now they rest hidden around the world. Going past the ruins and going north, we will enter the forest's highlands. The cold air starts to get in our chest, and the flutewood's melody sounds on a more violent pitch. Hiking higher, a landscape starts to peek behind the trees. A saturated sunset mirrors on a lake that splits the vast highlands in half, with just a flimsy wooden bridge beneath them, swaying gently in the breeze. While walking through these highlands, we finally have the time to reflect on our journey. Did we go far enough to achieve whatever we wanted? Hell, do we know where we are going? Perhaps we don't know. Is our path already decided and we should walk mindlessly to eventually reach our destination? Or are we the ones who make that path? Our way to the end is what truly matters. Or does the value of a journey depend on the destination? The flutewoods sing as our steps leave dry crunching beneath our feet. We cross a vagrant's crown again, except this one is completely without hair or string attached to it. As we know, Shady is a bold crown. Despite this, we press on. In the distance, we see a shadow sitting on a tree stump, wearing a long skirt and a pointy hat. As we approach, we can see something is off with their face. A long black tongue emerges from its wrinkled lips in a gruesome manner. It appears to be wearing a mask portraying a witch. The fact that the resting figure bears any resemblance to a witch may make us instantly distrust them. With mistrust comes a gentle voice from behind the mask. "Please fear not, traveller. Despite one's appearance, I am not a witch. I am Vikora, daughter of Derma. Normally I don't wear this kind of garment, but the witches took my younger brother, and I plan to take him back by infiltrating their coven. It's far from being a perfect plan, but I am telling it to you because I need someone like you to clear the path. I would be very grateful." She then hands us the crooked fang, commonly used by the wandering angels to achieve inhuman strength and reflexes. Whilst we don't help her directly by infiltrating the coven, we might as well clear any threats as we blindly wander forward. Arriving at the bridge is an imposing figure standing in the middle of the feeble structure. They are carrying an axe and a shield. His cape waves violently with the howling gales. As we approach to battle, they do as well, with each of their steps trembling the entire bridge. They point their axe at us. This is a good time to use the crooked fang that Vikora gave us. Doing so will cause our senses to sharpen. Everything from the creaking wood to the agitated breath of the enemy. Our surroundings move slower, and our eyes perceive the air currents as clear as a musical score. We feel our muscles growing and our blood warming. This only lasts for 5 minutes, after which we will pass out instantly. We best dispatch this enemy and get off this bridge as soon as possible. The knight falls off the bridge after our onslaught that we can barely understand. After reaching the other side, we notice how the oppressive flutewood sounds have been replaced with clear skies. The breeze is gentle, and the trees here are normal. After days of wandering around in the flutewood's melody, the absence of the whistles is a heavenly silence, interrupted only by the chirping of the birds and the wind blowing through the leaves. Ahead is the Shade Sanctum, an enormous structure rising atop of the highest hill, casting a shadow that engulfs the landscape. By the time we walk to it, the sun has begun setting. The gigantic sun with a grim expression that decorates the main gate makes us feel uneasy and small. The contrast with the sky makes it difficult to discern what's inside. The pinkish skies have now turned into an intense orange. We think about the false witch. Did she cross the bridge? Would she ever make it to the coven? We will simply never know. The sloping hills make for an arduous climb, but thanks to being rested, we don't feel exhaustion. We even get to enjoy the peaceful scenery. Approaching the gate at the foot of the sanctum, our heart skips a beat when we see a large skeleton standing inside, completely still. Its bones are covered in moss. Its unnerving presence makes our heart beat faster and the air feel heavier. If we try to look away, we will notice how our vision slowly fades and a high pressure starts to pound in our head. The gate behind the skeleton is dark. Not a single shape or dim light can be discerned from the outside. As we keep eye contact with the skeleton for some time, the bones will start moving. The skeleton raises both arms to shoulder height, slowly opening its hand to reveal a pair of coins on each hand. One is made of silver and the other made of mud. Taking either of the coins will cause the building to vanish in the blink of an eye. In order to pass through the gate, we must deposit a coin, depending on our will level. If you remember, this is one of the stats related to our character at the start of the game. If our will is low, we should deposit a coin made of silver or bronze on the left hand, and if our will is high, deposit one made of mud in the right hand. If we don't measure our will correctly or place the coins in the wrong hand, we will be inflicted with a curse. Inside the Shade Sanctum is a long, dark corridor with 1,000 eyes that greet us. The air is filled with the smell of cold, humid stone. Our eyes take a few minutes to get used to the pitch-dark environment. The Shade Sanctum is a merciless labyrinth full of monstrosities and deadly traps. Only the creatures of the dark and the insane have wandered around its nightmarish hallways. The entrance is filled with statues with deep, hollow eyes, and they have open wounds on their stomachs. Every statue here is different, but the features remain the same. Some of them have silver coins inside of their eyes, hence why I mentioned that it feels like we have 1,000 eyes looking at us. Being surrounded in the dark by these ghoulish figures chills our spine. Around the labyrinth we will find this symbol on the walls, ceilings and various small shrines. We aren't quite sure of its meaning. The first time we see it is on a mural at the end of the 1,000-eyed corridor. Looking directly into it, we don't see anything strange at first. We soon realise that every time we blink we can see it etched inside of our eyelids, like an optical illusion. The labyrinthian Shade Sanctum is separated into several layers. Each level reaches deeper into the underground, and its darkness becomes more and more dense to the point where not even flames can pierce through the shadows. No one has found the bottom of this labyrinth yet, and it may not exist at all. Venturing through, we eventually find a leering figure, dressed in an opulent armour full of emeralds. The knight notices our steps and says the following.
Please unshackle me from this terrible curse upon the living that we call fear. My mind is clouded with death. I cannot think. I cannot act. Why should I keep fighting? We're all doomed to turn into forgotten bones.
Near him we find a torch, a light of hope within these dark tunnels. From here on we can navigate much easier. We progress to a large room. At first sight the room seems empty, but we see a large palpitating lump of flesh in the corner of it. Completely harmless but highly disturbing. Upon inspecting the room we find a slight insect-like buzzing in the centre. Here lies an odd-looking ring. If we touch the ring we will carry Ketereth, the god of wrath's, white hives for the rest of our lives until it takes us. A sort of skin infection that completely destroys our outer layer of skin until we cannot take it anymore or our body gives up. This ring will only be appreciated by those who seek the forbidden god's favour. The pain of bearing the burden is rightful for giving birth to the purest of blessings. Exploring further, we find a room guarded by an undead dark sorcerer. Its mummified body is fragile and will fall apart with one blow, but its powerful rays are deadly and fast, the definition of a glass cannon. At first, the room will remain in complete silence until we enter its range, causing the room to fill up with candles. The shield of truth that we acquired back in the mossy ruins will be handy here to deflect its magic. But if we manage to get close enough we can snatch its necklace, the source of its power, also meaning its death. Venturing forth we soon come across an unexpected delight. A very dim light coming from the ceiling shows the flora around the room in a beautiful way. Deep within the labyrinth lies a pale garden surrounded by ivory pillars. In the middle of the room a talking skull floats ominously. moving slightly from side to side. The skull will not harm us in any way, and if we talk to him, the skull will answer only in riddles and nonsense. Either way, he enjoys the company of someone who appreciates the garden. Progressing, we come across a room full of bricked-up windows. This room hides a secret within its walls, and we must close our eyes or extinguish our torch and walk across the room until we find a chest. We must not open our eyes until we open the chest and grab the handle inside. The handle of the sword known as the Unseen Blade, also known as Zuchot. The blade is missing though, or is it? Well, the blade is actually invisible to the naked eye. It has the power to slay the intangible, from ghosts to shadows, and also makes our movements harder to predict for our enemies. The blade's weight and length can be felt despite not being able to see it, allowing us to use it like any other sword. Within the shadows of the labyrinth lurks the pale swordsman marionette, wandering endlessly through the dark hallways like a spider. Made of bones and pine, the macabre marionette is an invention of the witches in order to craft their own champion. To make the puppet inhumanly skilled, they used the bones from a great swordsman in the crafting, causing its skills to be like the one of the long-dead swordsman. Powered by the curse, the marionette swordsman swings its sword with inhuman speed. His claws and steel are coated in poison. The best we can do to avoid it is to put out our torch every time we hear the clacking of wood echo through the halls. To defeat it, we must smash its skull. Once that part is broken, it will collapse. Moving on, we will find a room covered in twisted roots and branches, with a striking visage filling one of the walls. In a cavity inside the mouth here is a small pond with poisoned water. Near this room is, well, you guessed it, another room. However, this one has 3 large columns that are perfectly mirrored. If we enter the other door, we will find ourselves in a highly illuminated but empty version of the labyrinth, and eventually come face to face with a shadow. This shadow is a shadow version of our character. Sadly, the book doesn't go into any detail about this encounter, but I guess it's simply the player character but more aggressive, fading away upon being killed. I think the reason why Plasterboo didn't go into any detail is because, well, it's entirely subjective what this shadow will be. Elsewhere is an amalgamation of lengthy hallways and corners filled with the sound of a familiar voice echoing within its walls. Here we find the dubious fiend, a man-shaped figure dancing and jiggling in the dark. Its feet don't touch the ground. If a light is shed over it, the creature will quickly be pulled away to the next dark corner by some kind of limb or appendage on its back.
It is here. I am me. I found it.
It repeats endlessly in an annoying fashion. In the heart of the first layer of the labyrinth, we find a great room full of archways. This room hides a cursed warrior, once a brave knight who wielded a powerful weapon that ended up feasting on his humanity, fusing to his arm and turning him into a blood-starved beast that wanders around the labyrinth, howling and screaming in pain while searching for fresh blood to feed his axe. He attacks in a hysterical and erratic manner. Blow after blow, scream after scream. We can trick him by making him run into one of the columns around the room, or by making him strike one, causing his axe to get stuck. A good time to slice it off completely. The warrior collapses to the ground after the arm is detached, motionless and silent. A creeping sound comes from the severed hand, and we contemplate in horror as we watch the flesh twist and grow, snapping and popping. The axe arm then crawls rapidly into the shadows, never to be seen again. There is a hallway in the labyrinth that constantly changes locations. Once we step inside the hallway, we notice how the path is abnormally long, and the hallway doesn't seem to end. There are no doors or corners in sight. The wind blows more violently, and our torch flickers. Walking back to the beginning isn't possible now, as the hallway can extend in both directions. We gradually hear footsteps behind us. Every time we stop, they do as well. Shedding our light on the source of the steps results in us seeing the glimpse of a shadow, quickly retiring into the dark. If we keep following the shadow, it will eventually get tired of this, and face us. A horrifying visage looks at us. The grotesque and threatening features of the visage make us want to pull our torch away, just to keep the face out of our eyes. But seeing it will be better than not seeing it. What an irksome little thing, that flickering light of yours. Hast thou considered joining the shadows, a warm and comfortable lodging regardless of what it may seem? Thou art welcome here, lost traveller. Extinguish thy flame and join our home. If we accept the invitation, we will join the darkness in eternity, never to be alone again and leaving our mortal body behind. If we refuse, the creature will go away without saying a word, and the blowing wind will abruptly stop as the illusion fades away. We can now discern in the distance a big gate at the end of the hallway, allowing us to progress through the labyrinth. One of the final rooms we may find is a flooded room hiding an odd-looking artifact. It's difficult to deduce its purpose, but it has an inscription that reads, "Butcher's Firstborn." In order to use this artifact, we must harm ourselves with it. In exchange for our blood, wounds, and limbs, it may grant one of the following. Blood gives us the Butcher's Blessing. A wound gives us the Paladin of Flesh. And a limb gives us the Meat Demon. These wounds will never fully heal, and the book doesn't go into detail as to what these items are, but that only gives us more to think about and create. On the lower levels of the labyrinth is a lot of stagnant water. It reaches our calves and hinders our passage. Throughout these corridors we can hear disturbing echoes of something moving in the water from the distance. Struggling along, we find a large room that conjoins several hallways. Each one is incredibly lengthy. It requires a couple of hours to reach the end, and the water makes it harder to cross through. At the end of each hallway is a rotting corpse dressed in ceremonial garments, inflated by the stagnant water. The room, at the very end, contains only a well. This room is different from the others. Approaching the well in the middle of the room, we feel a pressure in our chest. We can't point out why. We hesitate for a moment. Why does this well seem familiar? Eventually, the urge for knowledge is too much, and we look into the reflection in the well. The reflection looks back at us, deep hollow eyes we can't recognize. The body of a stranger made of old bones and paper-thin skin. The image in the well fills us with dread. A feeble illusion shatters in silence. The well welcomes us back gently. A life has been lived, and a dream is no longer. The old bones now slumber, waiting for the moon to rise once again. Which flesh is your flesh? So, that is the end of the first book. Many of you might want me to slow down and explain some things, but here's the thing. Many things just cannot be explained and are intentionally written to be vague. This is so we, as the reader, can get busy theory making or use the book for our own creative inspiration. What we can gather from the end, though, is that the skeleton from the very start of the book dreamed the entire thing, as we pick up from their point of view at the very end of the book. The entire third act of this video is where I go deeper into explaining and discussing the contents of these books, but for now it's best we move on. Vermis II is, well, quite different from the first book. Whilst the first book leaned heavily into being an RPG, the second book more so focuses on world building and storytelling. It is also not connected to the first book's story, but is based in the same world. Vermis II is also much longer than Vermis I, and because it's more focused on world building than the first entry, there is a lot more to read, so strap in for this one. There is also a somewhat clear narrative here, unlike the first book as well. Again, a lot of the things are explained either as we go or aren't explained at all, or will only make sense with enough analysis. As I said, the latter will be done during the final act of the video, where I explain as much as I can from both books. The second book opens with the following. The knells of the bell echo along endless corridors. The mist engulfs everything. Those glassy eyes that chase you wherever you go are none but your own. Here we are introduced to the Glass Purgatory, a place divided between two worlds floating in a limbo between reality and illusion. Woe to the souls who venture into the labyrinthine halls, for they will be stripped of all that makes them themselves. In the deepest part of the Glass Purgatory, a cloaked figure lies between the cold stone walls. It rests and contemplates the glass shards scattered on the floor. I have been listening to the whispers in the darkness. They preach about the true nature of our kin. They say, dances without cease the puppet made of mud and wood. In a macabre and endless dance, it stares at its reflection, prisoner of the illusion. I have torn my flesh looking for warmth, for humanity, only to find this dark sludge, and yet, for that brief instant, my eyes were mine alone. After this extremely vague introduction, we are told about Agorot. Whilst Vermis I was based in the northern part of this world, Vermis II focuses largely on the southern part. Agorot is filled with the songs of trade and humanity. Rare are the sounds outside the city, as lands beyond the desert rot in silence due to their deep and incurable wounds. This city, on the contrary, life continues as usual. The living stay here above the sands whilst the rest are beneath them. The sheer vastness of the desert is what keeps the city isolated from the other domains. Foreigners are rare in Agorot. Long ago, the Great Desert was the heart of the old world. No matter where one goes, they were sure to come across the vestiges of the colossal structures that used to populate its sands. Many of them are still hidden under its dunes, forever guarding their treasures. The relics of the scorched land are the livelihood of many of its dwellers, as they often plunge into the bones of the old world for something valuable. This is an extremely dangerous task, and the threats often outweigh the pay. Because of this, the tomb robbers that roam through Agorot are, for the most part, individuals with nothing to lose. They do not fear curses nor the influence of the old gods. They risk their lives looking for measly chips of gold and silver. A merchant refuses to buy the relic offered by a tomb robber. The shopkeeper insists that it was an offering to the dead sun. Where it was stolen from its rightful place, a curse fell upon it. The man who is trying to sell the relic is known as the Wayfarer. He is the protagonist of Vermis II and represents the player character. Unlike the first book, in Vermis II we have a set character. Because of this, I will be talking from a third-person view focused on him, unlike in Vermis I, which was largely first-person with me guiding us through it. Ancient civilization that once venerated now long forgotten gods lay under the immense desert. Periodically, the dunes shift to expose their carcasses to the undying sun, allowing the daring to delve into their entrails. Some of the sanctuaries that normally hide below the sands are home to strange figures that exert a dark influence over those who dare to contemplate them. Within the desert exist solstices, which the sun shines on at specific parts of the day. Each of these are dedicated to a certain divinity or god. As the book tells us, we cannot pick bones from these places. This occurs multiple times and makes more sense once I get into who the Wayfarer really is. The Solar Crypt in the path of Gerveg the Great, the Sanctuary of Silence in the Dunes of Silver, the Dead Sun Shrine in the Agorot South, the Plague House in the Valley of the Wind, the Tower of Decay in Ketereth's Fingers, the Maze of Ashes in the Sea of Bones, and the Hidden Temple in the summits of Agorot. These solstices make up the path of the undying sun. What this is exactly isn't explained. Within these sands exist bone hunters. Bones can tell tales, and even though they are hollow, they are full of power for those who know how to use them. The bone hunters are infamous for beheading their victims and offering their skulls to Gailag, as decapitation is common for the followers of the god. The most devout going as far as to offer their own heads for the cause. The bone hunters tend to be solitary and ruthless, feared by the travellers and merchants that trek throughout the endless deserts of Agorot. They have a wide range of equipment, a sword and dagger as well as black iron armour, but also some utilities. A Gailag fetish is a small idol made of wood and ivory, exploration gear of various materials, containers and tools which allow them to easily explore ruins and temples. They also have a crooked fang that once belonged to an emissary snake. Its venom enhances its user's strength and reflexes for a short period of time, before rendering them unconscious. If you remember, the protagonist of Vermis I also had the chance to acquire one. Even though all bone hunters share a common goal, they act in different ways in order to please the dark desires of their god. Some of them could be seen as opportunistic bandits that, after robbing their victims, sacrifice their bodies to Gailac, while others simply revel in the massacres they commit. Then there are those who simply collect bones to decorate the altars of the Coiled One, which is just another name for Gailac. The bone hunters tend not to socialise amongst themselves, since some of them do not hesitate to kill whoever they come across without caring much for what god they serve. This doesn't happen on Gailac's holy grounds though. The mere utterance of Gailac's name still instills fear in many and devotion in a few. He is an old god of death and darkness with many titles. But the two-headed snake and the vengeful one are but the most common ones. Gailac was condemned by Marco with the Eternal Curse, thus sealing both of their fates, since the devotees of the snake god wasted no time avenging their fallen god. Marco was beheaded and defiled, hence suffering the same fate as Gailac. When Gailac was decapitated, such was the sorrow of his people that one of his devotees offered him her own head, as a symbol of her eternal love. Her visage became that of her god of all eternity. The corpse of Gailac was praised and his will was heard louder than before. During these times, his wrath caused millions of heads to roll. Vengeance turned into pure, rampant depravity. Even though the cult of Gailac dwindled over time, there are still followers who wish to uncurse him, roaming the lands in search of a cure, death following their steps. Of course, the deserts surrounding Agaroth are scorching, so the people here don armours, helmets, masks and ornaments made of black iron, a strange mineral that is always cold to the touch. It was originally discovered in what is now known as the Pestilent Mines. Over time, it has been used in weapon manufacturing, food preservation and refrigeration. It is unusual to stumble across this mineral outside Agaroth, since the mines are no longer active and black iron was mainly exported to these deserts. The wayfarer rests alone next to a campfire, the faint warmth soothing his restless bones. He tries to close his eyes, but his tormented mind doesn't allow him to. He does not remember his past life thanks to the countless years of wandering the sands. He meanders from place to place, plundering tombs and snatching the life out of those who dare to threaten him, offering them to his insatiable god. He cannot recall when it all started, at what moment the hunter became the hunted. His burden lessens when he forgets about the shadows. He never stops for too long, afraid of them catching up to him. He cannot sleep for too long, and walks all day. His faith in Gailac allows him to face enemies without fear. However, he cannot help but shiver whenever he thinks of what stalks him from behind. They plague his nightmares, allowing him to catch brief glimpses of their faces. Sometimes they just look eerily familiar, other times downright monstrous. Those unsettling and twisted visages hidden in the shadows terrorize him, but he has no memory of seeing any of them outside of his dreams, meaning that it's his imagination alone that molds them, turning them into what he fears the most, making them impossible to confront. His mind envisions the Revenant shredding the flesh from his bones and ripping their head from his torso. The next day, after a long journey walking through the desert, the wayfarer spots in the distance a large stone structure partially buried in the sand. At its entrance lies a resting figure shrouded in a tattered orange cloak. As the wayfarer approaches, the man picks himself up, but he can barely stand on his own 2 feet. The stranger limps towards the wayfarer, unsuccessfully trying to hide his right arm within his cloak. His arm is petrified. He pulls out an eye-shaped trinket and shows it to the wayfarer. "I know what thou art, I know of thy kin. If thou art to behead me, I plead thee to hear me first. This relic opens a gate to unfathomable treasures, riches far beyond what thou could need in thy whole life. But I, and I alone, know how to cross said gate. If thou forgive my life, I swear to share the wealth with thee once I discover its exact location." The wayfarer may slay him, receiving his half-petrified skull. Inside the partially buried stone structure lies a sage-faced beast. The huge beast lies dead in a puddle of black blood with a bronze sword sticking out of its side. Near the creature rests a stone crown. The wayfarer draws near to examine it, but he immediately notices just how heavy it is. Next, he approaches the head of the beast and, without hesitation, proceeds to rip out its eyes with a dagger, pocketing them thereafter. The bronze sword in the sage-faced beast has been solidified inside the corpse of the creature. The blood of the beast has reacted with the bronze after coming in contact with it, forming a stony scab around the wound. After pulling on it for a while, it comes loose, save the part that has been infused with the beast. The end of the blade has been tainted with dry blood. Going deeper into this buried temple, the visages of stony faces on the walls seem to follow the wayfarer, no matter where he goes. He warily handles the eye-shaped relic as he makes his way forward, pondering the words of the petrified stranger, wondering if he spoke truth, or if it was all a ruse to save his life. After many hours roaming through the desolated temple, the wayfarer starts hearing murmurs in the distance. With his paranoia only growing as he marches deeper and deeper, he considers giving up and looking for a way out, afraid that the shadows could have followed him all the way here. However, at that moment, an archway distinct from the rest catches his eye. Here we get some lore relating to the Goblin Queen. That is in the book itself, the wayfarer doesn't get any of this. The self-proclaimed Queen of the Goblins. In years past, consort to the last king of the Great Citadel. She orchestrated the murder of her husband and fled into the woods accompanied by her personal guard. There she established her own kingdom and erected a castle over the bones of scrawny creatures that fearfully followed her every command. The queen gave birth to 2 daughters, a beautiful girl of argent locks and jade skin, and a hideous abomination, a punishment for her sins. She chained her second child in the depths of a well like she was no more than a beast, keeping her fed with the flesh of her serfs. Amid the spilled blood, the horror and the depravity, a beautiful and gentle flower blossomed. The princess expressed genuine devotion toward the creature she grew up with, awakening new feelings of kindness and love among those who surrounded her. Eventually, the princess led a rebellion that ended her mother's life. The queen was thrown into the maws of the beast of her own blood. After the revolt, the Green Sun Kingdom rose from the ashes of the queen, led by the princess and her faithful knights. They swore that, under their rule, not a single drop of goblin blood will ever be spilled again. So we actually have a little connection to Vermis I here. The protagonist of Vermis I encountered the dead body of this princess, and the Green Sun Ruins, well, they have a similar name to that kingdom that we've just mentioned, the Green Sun Kingdom. A tale of revenge that resulted in what seemed to be peace. But it seemed that no matter what, the princess would have died anyway. The wayfarer finds himself in a pillar-filled room. The mumbles turn into a weird melody that echo among the columns. Within this pillar-filled room is a large mirror that stands amidst bones. The skeletons rest at the feet of the pillars, and as the wayfarer observes the scene, the mumble abruptly stops. Startled, the wayfarer unsheathes his sword before the mirror. He has seen things during the course of his travels, but such a flawless reflection of his own self was not one of them. He had not seen his face so clearly before. Quickly realizing the true nature of the figure that stands in front of him, the wayfarer approaches the mirror to inspect it up close. The skeletons leaning against the pillar share a certain detail. Even though their skin rotted away from their bones long ago, they all retain their eyes, for they have crystallized. In their sockets they glint, immaculate, giving their owners an unnervingly lifelike appearance. The wayfarer contemplates the unfamiliar face in the mirror. Tired and worried eyes stare back at him. Mixed feelings sprout inside him. He feels comforted yet lonely, for he cannot remember the last time he looked at the face of someone he could trust.
Is this the visage of death or of devotion?
He thinks, as he vividly recalls all the times he has snuffed out the life of a fellow man. His pondering is then interrupted when he notices something unusual. In the reflection, a huge doorway leading to a long corridor is seen. It stands a few steps behind him. The wayfarer turns to confirm that there is nothing there, but the dark forest of pillars, stretching as far as the eye can see. And yet, when he looks at the mirror's image once more, the gate is still there. Intrigued, he steps backwards slowly whilst keeping his eyes on the glass. Soon enough, he is being engulfed by the walls of that mysterious hallway. From here, the Wayfarer is transported into the glass purgatory. Deeper, the Wayfarer sinks into the enigmatic reflections, not breaking visual contact with the glass for a moment. However, before long, he thinks he can hear a murmur behind him. He turns his head to find only the emptiness of the hallway, illuminated by the quivering light of his torch. The damp air glitters like diamond dust, creating an alluring otherworldly ambience. He is no longer in the room of pillars. Turning again towards the mirror, he finds himself staring at a stone wall. The mirror is nowhere to be found. The Wayfarer reaches for the wall with his hand and nervously feels it, making sure it is not an illusion. While he does so, he notices a brick unlike the rest, for it displays a strange symbol that he has never seen before. The Wayfarer creates a rubbing of the figure using a piece of charcoal and a papyrus sheet, just in case he needs it later. After the Wayfarer finishes doing so, we get a bit of exposition relating to Gervek the Great, one of the gods. Long ago, a giant roamed the world alongside man. He was venerated as a god since his nature did not strive away from divinity. He protected humans as if they were his own flesh, and many titans found death by his colossal longsword. For years, he slept atop mountains and deep valleys as beds, lullabied by the birds, tucked in by the silvery mist. His blade still rests to this day on summits high, waiting for someone worthy of wielding its greatness. The Wayfarer then pushes forward until he arrives at a massive chamber. 5 paths converge under a gaze of 5 gargantuan glass-faced stone effigies, sitting on thrones. In the centre of the room, which is reflected in all 5 of their faces, rests an eerie statue under a pillar of light. Intimidated by the eldritch scene, the Wayfarer slowly descends the stairs and carefully approaches the figure, the Sphinx. Light pours over its stone face. A contorted grin unveils before the Wayfarer. A ghastly aura envelops the stone beast. Stopping to examine the unnerving statue, the Wayfarer is fast to realise that its left eye greatly resembles the relic he got from the stranger outside the labyrinth. Its right eye is hollow. The Wayfarer reaches down to his pocket and fits the relic in the hollow eye socket. A few seconds pass and the relic starts sinking further into the cavity. It is a perfect fit. At that moment, the Wayfarer's right eye starts trembling. He panics but can do nothing as his eye becomes loose and falls to the floor. He collapses, screaming in agony. After a while, the piercing pain recedes and the wound stops bleeding. It is then that the Wayfarer notices that if he covers his left eye, he can see through the eyes of the stone Sphinx. He sees himself with only his remaining eye. The floor begins to tremble, and before long, the central platform starts rotating. Dust and small debris rain down from the vault above. The stairs turn along the floor, detaching from the doors. The movement then stops when one of them reaches the feet of the middle throne, unveiling a new pathway underneath the colossal figure that sits upon it. Now, within the labyrinth lurk certain creatures. The Red King is an entity that hides behind a mirror's image. Within Red Nest, a foul place riddled with disease, lurks the most twisted of kings. He abandoned his human carcass long ago, adopting a new form with which to reign over his very own hell. The sting of a bastard of the Red King carries white hives, which we learned in Vermis I is a fate worse than death. The flying effigies patrol the glass purgatory without rest. They are strange creatures carefully sculpted in stone that decorate the walls of the purgatory. If a mirror is shattered, these figures will awake and tear themselves off their resting places to give chase to the person who smashed it. Their shiny, gem-like eyes are able to emit a petrifying light ray. Those who manage to evade their gaze can still be paralysed by their venomous tail. Zurich is the sovereign of the Glass Hand Castle, an area that hides within a mirror. What started as a prison ended up becoming a comfortable home for the vain wizard, since he is always greeted by his majestic figure, no matter where he looks. Lost in his delirium, he rules over his hundreds of loyal reflections, who quiver under his might. The living cages are torture devices designed to punish those who intrude into the purgatory. Rusty iron behemoths covered in spikes and blades. They remain inert until a prisoner is locked in them. The mouths of the living cages are open at all times, offering a view of their interiors in order to intimidate those who oppose them with the pained expression of their captives. Cellar daughters are monstrous creatures that inhabit the deepest parts of the glass purgatory. Concealed in a permanent penumbra, these abominations patiently wait in their nests for their victims. The closer one is to them, the thicker the darkness grows. They are capable of imitating the cry of an infant in order to lure or unsettle their prey. Only the tolls of a certain bell can drive these creatures away, and only a blessed blade can give them death. In the chamber of the silent blades, the Lord of Worms resides, a being that obtained a humanoid body and mind of its own after centuries of wriggling and feeding upon corpses. Within the chamber there are only ghosts and rot. Nevertheless, the Lord of Worms rose to reign over them. The conjoined witch holds a vast knowledge in many fields of magic, for it possesses the collective intellect of the bodies that form it. It remains dormant in the glass nest, contemplating the primordial glass. Lastly is the conjoined warrior, who, alongside the conjoined witch I just mentioned, was created by the purgatory to protect its heart. The warrior is a creature that was moulded out of the rotten carcasses of the most skilled and powerful warriors who lay dead within the purgatory. The conjoined warrior is an opponent like no other, unstoppable and with devastating strength. It was trusted with the mission of hunting down anyone who dared to enter the heart of the purgatory. Okay, going back to the Wayfarer. He sets foot in a strange place filled with mirrors. Here, the cavernous walls draw undulant roots that frame the pieces of glass. He places his hand against one of the walls to feel the cold stone as he advances, his fingers tracing the serpentine recesses in the damp, rough wall. The Wayfarer halts when his hand encounters the smooth surface of one of the mirrors. He turns his head and observes it carefully. Examining the details of his own helm in the reflection, he tries to find his gaze through the black iron, to no avail. Feeling that the mirror's image is distorted, he reaches towards it with his hand once more. As soon as his hand touches the glass, the surface ripples, and he realizes that he is on his knees in front of the basin of a massive fountain. A dim light of unknown origin showers over a cloaked statue as it pours an unending stream of water into the fountain. Allured by the promise of fresh water, the Wayfarer lets himself sink shoulder deep in the dark nectar. Lost in thought while glancing at the wavy reflections, he feels revitalized, his whole body loosening up in a rare moment of peace. However, he soon discerns a small shiny object lying at the bottom of the basin. Approaching it, the Wayfarer ends up in a deeper part of the fountain, only to be grabbed by a woman from below.
To whom belongs thy flesh?
The Wayfarer struggles against the woman's grasp for a few seconds to no avail. He panics, for he is quickly running out of air. He gurgles Gilek's name, a cloud of bubbles escaping his mouth. She eases her grip. The water's surface breaks and the Wayfarer gasps for air. He swims to the fountain's edge as he recovers from the shock. The Wayfarer notices a monster opposite him. He reaches for his sword, but the creature immediately notices and breaks the standoff, lunging over him like a coiling cascade of fangs and scales. Defeating the beast grants the Wayfarer pieces of its bone or a shiny amulet. Again, Vermis II doesn't give much explanation or clarification regarding gameplay, so most items don't have descriptions, meaning that it's up to us what they do. The water turns red as the body of the beast sinks. A couple seconds pass before the Wayfarer notices that the monster took his left arm with it. Clutching the wound, the Wayfarer realizes just how hopeless his situation is. Blood just keeps pouring out of the stump where the arm once was.
I will not leave this place alive, Gilek. Have mercy on this poor servant,
he muses. The Wayfarer submerges in an attempt to alleviate the throbbing pain. The sounds of the water help calm his restless mind, but they are soon eclipsed by a strange and distant sound. A bell. It grows louder to the point of becoming deafening. A mist then engulfs everything around him, and the Wayfarer finds himself standing in front of a fogged-up mirror. The same one he touched before appearing at the fountain. His left arm has returned, as if nothing had happened. It seems that he has returned to normality. He is stunned. The feeling of the air against his torn flesh and the warmth of the blood on his clothes are still fresh in his mind. His right eye is still missing. He checks his right hand, hoping to see it freed from a curse he has had for a long time now. However, he notices that this curse he has only grown since the last time he saw it. Perhaps, one day, it will consume him completely. The Wayfarer ventures down the endless corridors full of foggy mirrors. He exchanges glances with the innumerable reflections clouded by the dew. The Wayfarer sees far more than his own image in them. He sees things that make him shiver and quicken his pace. There are 15 in total, briefly shown on the screen now. They are all disfigured in some way, so much that even the Wayfarer quickens his step. Eventually, the Wayfarer hears the unsheathing of a sword behind him. When he turns, he finds himself face to face with a shadow, emerging out of one of the many mirrors with its sword raised against him. Blocking the strike, the Wayfarer experiences the overwhelming strength of his rival.
The shadows, they have found me,
he thinks as he tries to deflect the Shade's sword. Even though the shadows have always been his greatest fear, the Wayfarer forces himself to keep looking at the sinister wraith. Its eyes were two dark pearls filled with pure terror. The wraith mimics every movement the Wayfarer makes, and soon the Wayfarer feels fatigue settle in. Gathering the last of his strength, the Wayfarer delivers a powerful slash. Silence dawns upon the hallway, broken only by a metallic sound as the fiend's helmet hits the stone floor, and once more as the rest of its body does. The Wayfarer collapses to his knees, exhausted, facing the enemy who did the same, except headless. The Wayfarer occasionally wonders if those chasing figures that tormented him were nothing more than deliriums. Though, having executed one of them now, he has been able to disprove one of his preoccupations. The Wayfarer may loot the bones of the wraith. At the end of the long mirror-filled corridor, the Wayfarer sets foot in a circular chamber with a smaller room in its centre. He peeks the second room, only to find it empty. At that very moment, a whistle can be heard behind him. He turns around, only to find himself in an already familiar situation. The path behind him has vanished. Frustrated, the Wayfarer circles around the room, checking the outer walls for a way out. After a while, a small flash of light startles him as he passes in front of the entrance of the inner room. Inside, he finds that the room is square and has a small mirror hanging on its far side. Walking in, he warily stares at the mirror, accidentally kicking something into the middle of the room. Examining it, he sees it is a weird-looking whistle. After brushing the dust off it, the Wayfarer finds an inscription. "Whistle, and I shall come to thee." The ominous whistle is in poor condition and unusually cold to the touch. Here we get a story related to this whistle. With the first blowing, the birds became quiet. With the second, the dogs barked. With the third, the whistling turned into a scream that made him shiver. The peasant did not believe in ghost stories, but such was the dread that the whistle made him feel that he buried it so it could not be used again. The days went by, but that strange inscription would not abandon his thoughts. He had the feeling something really was after him. Since the day he blew that whistle, he would wake up drenched in sweat every night. Terrible nightmares deprived him of his rest. During a stormy, moonless night, the peasant was visited. Something knocked on his door, and the squall died down. It knocked again, and the dogs barked. It knocked a third time. "Who is there?" he asked. After a long pause, a loud whistle froze his blood. The Wayfarer eventually finds a light pouring out of a doorway. He peeks through it and finds a stairway leading up. Ascending, fresh air cleanses his lungs. The Wayfarer is dumbfounded. As he climbs the stairs as fast as he can, the breeze grows stronger and the light brighter. Bliss and relief wash over him when he starts hearing bird songs not too far away. Finally reaching the top, the Wayfarer marvels before the vast and unfamiliar expanse. The Wayfarer stands atop the balcony of a colossal, dilapidated castle. Leaning out of the edge, he contemplates a lush sea of trees extending beyond the horizon. His relief quickly turns back into distress in view of the unfamiliar panorama. Such greenery can only mean he is far from his desert homeland. The Wayfarer roams through the forgotten walls in silence, accompanied by the whistling of the wind between the stones. After a while, the calmness starts to comfort his tortured soul. Optimistic thoughts cross his mind, thoughts of a new beginning, about a different life, and about amending the weight of his violent actions. After wandering for a while, he realizes there is no way out of the balcony. There are no doors and the windows are out of reach. Climbing seems useless, and even more so would be descending the balcony's wall. Defeated, the Wayfarer aimlessly meanders his stony prison. The night soon comes, and the Wayfarer finds shelter on the balcony. He gazes at the starry sky for the first and last time. That night, he had no dreams at all. A familiar racket awakens the Wayfarer, the clashing of swords. He stands up and looks for the source of the noise. He follows it until he stands in front of the doorway that led him out of the glass purgatory. Peeking inside, he immediately realizes that the stairway has changed shape, for it now coils down into the castle. The Wayfarer hastily descends the stairs. The sounds of battle grow louder. Reaching the end of the stairway, a huge and grotesque severed head rolls to his feet. The light in the eyes of the creature snuffs out. Silence. Ahead, the large body of the creature stands headless. Its killer, a knight, drops her longsword to the floor with a loud clang, before she too collapses out of exhaustion. The knight, the ogre slayer, tries to rise to her feet again, leaning on her sword for support. As soon as she hears the Wayfarer's steps, she speaks with a soft yet firm voice while she tries to hide her obvious exhaustion and grave wounds.
Who goes there? If what thou look for is death, then fear not and approach. I am far from defeated. Thou canst search for thy precious carrion somewhere else. I have not reached this accursed place and given death to this wretched beast to end like this. Whatever thou art, I do not.
She collapses, blood sliding down her dented helmet onto the cobblestone. The Wayfarer draws near to inspect the body. Her longsword is too heavy for even him to use, and the armour could fall apart at any moment. She isn't carrying anything of value except a skull of another ogre. The Wayfarer walks through these tunnels that now serve their original purpose once more, soon reaching the main gate. It is ajar. Slipping past, he admires the majestic forest that is on the other side. It is a completely foreign environment to him. He quivers at the sound of dry leaves and branches under his feet. Wasting no time, the Wayfarer lets himself be swallowed by the new world before him. Within the forest are the Eclipse Towers, ancient consecrated monuments raised for the search of enlightenment. Since the beginning of time, the towers have remained sealed with their devotees still dwelling within them. Listening close enough, the Wayfarer hears mantras echoing inside. All of the towers are just as tall as they are in the sky, then deep as they are underground. If the Wayfarer somehow finds his way inside one of these towers, he will find many enemies inside. There are 6 types to be precise, and they vary from passive seekers of light, including floating corpse-like spheres that float ominously, to awakened devotees whose bodies have lost all function, with only the minds that have been opened up exposing others to the wisdom of light. If the Wayfarer looks into their light, he will go instantly insane. Another horrifying devotee here is the Enlightened. They have completely abandoned their old bodies, leaving behind a mass of dry flesh and bones. They emit a constant high-pitched whistle that induces dizziness and nausea in those nearby, and are able to project images in people's minds. Treading the forest, the Wayfarer notices the sunset has dyed the landscape a saturated amber. He cannot stop recalling the image of his eye at the feet of the Sphinx. Wondering what would happen if he were to close his left eye again, he tries to do so, but his body rejects the idea and refuses. He cannot be sure if the Sphinx's influence would still be able to reach him, given that he is so far away from the accursed statue now. But the mere thought of going back to that somber place through the eyes of the idol and confirming that part of him is still trapped there is both a huge effort and terrifying. Despite his role in this world as a servant of Gailak, this journey has done enough to him to cause immense fear in both this new environment and what he has been through. The Wayfarer looks for a place to rest for the night, finding a huge stone entrance through a thicket. Within are verdant stone steps that descend into the darkness below. A pleasant aroma can be smelled here, and the Wayfarer feels the damp of the wall as he assists himself downward. By the time the Wayfarer reaches the bottom of the stairway, he can clearly hear chants in the distance. Following the chanting, the Wayfarer reaches a large chamber full of scrawny, dark-robed people, with their faces hidden under hoods. They all cease their song and slowly turn toward him, and from the darkness behind them, a large figure emerges. The abominable effigy casts its gaze upon the Wayfarer before emitting a deafening cry, and the hooded figures instantly charge toward him. These acolytes are each varied in their abilities, between magic spells, immense physical strength, smoke and daggers, and one that acts as a shield for the eye at the back that we learn is called Ogle's Eye, a being born from Ogle's will to lead his followers. This is the first time we've heard of this Ogle, but it seemingly is an extremely powerful beast or some sort of divinity that has remained hidden from the surface world. One of the figures murmurs some words and points at the Wayfarer. All of a sudden, the entire room falls silent. A barrage of cold, bony hands grab and snatch at his armour, denting it with unnatural strength. Overwhelmed, the Wayfarer struggles in vain to unsheath his sword, deaf even to his own screams. Grasping at a hidden dagger that he has always kept close to him, the Wayfarer manages to stab one of the robed ones. The figure instantly dissolves into a dense cloud of black smoke and dissipates into the air. One by one the acolytes fall before the Wayfarer. Individually they would be no match for him, but the sheer amount of them leaves him wounded and exhausted by the time it's over. After the fray, only the monstrous beast remains, surrounded by the last of its servants. After the last of its servants are slain, the beast frantically attacks, striking the Wayfarer many times. The Wayfarer attempts to block, but the beast breaks its own surprisingly brittle arms. It falls to the floor, immobile. Its singular eye stares at the Wayfarer for a few seconds before he sinks his blade into its head. The creature melts away immediately, leaving only bones behind. The Wayfarer then notices a strange altar at the back of the room. Getting closer to it, a nauseating stench assaults him. It comes from a large cavity in the shrine, and the Wayfarer realises the strands that decorate the altar are black hairs that spill out of it. In it, he finds a sword of unusual appearance. It is wrapped in mouldy bandages, dark hair peeking out of them. The pommel is decorated with claws and nails. Here we get a large amount of exposition. In the days of yore lived a devil among devils. He who dwelled in the darkest of darkness. His soul was sealed in an orichalcum sword by a powerful wizard who lost his life while trapping the fearsome beast. As years went by, the demon's prison progressively twisted into an unhinged shape. The ill-fated ones that were destined to guard the weapon swore that they could hear whispers coming from it. Those foolish enough to look at its naked blade collapsed in fear, some of them even dying from sheer terror. No one has ever dared to wield it in battle. Whether this is about the sword that the Wayfarer found in the hair-ridden chest or not isn't known. But the fact it is described to be cursed and is wrapped in mouldy bandages, that may just be the case. With the way clear, the Wayfarer makes his way through the church. Accompanied by the chirps of crickets and whispers of the breeze, the Wayfarer allows himself to reflect for a few seconds. Suddenly, noises barge in, loud tolls echo through the empty chamber he walks through. The Wayfarer, scared and confused, tries to find the origin, but this proves futile. The ringing does not stop, and, as if called by them, a mist begins to swallow the room. The Wayfarer finds himself once more in the glass purgatory. He contemplates his foggy reflection within the darkness. Soon enough, water trickles down the mirror's surface. The mirror shatters under the weight of the Wayfarer's fist. Hu then stomps them repeatedly. His hopes lie broken on the floor. Sitting in the corner of the room, he ponders. He checks under his armour only to find that the mark of the curse has spread over his shoulder. It is a grim reminder that his time wears thin. Finding no reason to continue, the Wayfarer remains in the corner until he drifts to sleep. He dreams about home, of the unending sand plains of Agarat. To be specific, the solstice known as the Tower of Decay. In the distance, atop a hill, shadows observe him. They all stand still. The Wayfarer turns away from them and starts walking, pushing his way through the sand for hours. He comes face to face with a large ruinous stone covered in moss. It is completely out of place. Its mouth, big enough for someone to crawl in, is overrun with foliage. A pleasant breeze emanates from within. The Wayfarer buries his head into the maw of the stone. Cold, soft leaves caress his face as his body sinks headfirst into the seemingly endless hole. Before him, he finds nothing but darkness, not a menacing darkness but a cozy one. This causes him to awaken from his dream. The Wayfarer hears the sound of a bell again. Surrounded by mist, he stands up, the glass fragments crunching under his feet. Within the glass purgatory, it is impossible to tell minutes from hours, day from night, or reality from illusion. The Wayfarer's spirit cracked along with that mirror. His body now moves on its own like an empty shell. Where before the circular chamber was, now the Wayfarer finds an amalgamation of corridors that extend, ramify and cross each other like tree roots. As he erratically ventures through the hallways, he muses on his destiny as to when it was sealed. He thinks about Gailac, the dead son, and the stranger who carried the eye relic. The Wayfarer traverses a long hallway that narrows the further he advances. Long glass ovals adorn the damp walls. He feels something moving in his pocket. The amulet he acquired from the snake back at the fountain trembles violently, a dim light blinking within its gem. While inspecting it, the Wayfarer realizes that its light's intensity changes depending on the direction he points it. With his hand raised, the Wayfarer moves the necklace around, trying to find the direction that makes it shine brighter. Then another light draws his attention. A small radiant orb glows just a few steps away from him. All of a sudden, from the shadows, materializes a sinister hand that starts gesturing over the sphere, and some incomprehensible words can be heard. The Wayfarer points the amulet toward the light globe. A shrill scream is heard as a tall skeleton draped in dark clothes is revealed in the process of collapsing. Its bones turn to dust the moment they hit the stone tiles. The Wayfarer's pendant's light dwindles and then dies out. The Wayfarer, baffled by the sheer power of the amulet, decides to wear it on his neck to keep it within hand's reach at all times. The remains of the skeleton had nothing of value except for a staff that clasps an orb of amber. It is warm to the touch. Holding the globe up to the light of his torch, the Wayfarer finds an insect presented inside the amber. Continuing his way forward, the Wayfarer comes across an intense light pouring out of a doorway in one of the corridor sides. Entering the light, he finds a room lined with polished green tiles. Not wanting to face his reflection again, the Wayfarer turns to leave, but his gaze lands on a grand stone ark that is borne among the tiles. It looks like it does not belong in this place. Inside is a chamber full of mirrors, its floor as reflective as the mirrors attached to the walls. The room is bathed in dim light. The dust floats motionless, visible in the air. An ominous figure slowly emerges from the floor before the Wayfarer. Floating in the air, the apparition levitates a glass shard between its hands. The mirror piece tilts and turns until it focuses on the Wayfarer. At that moment, every mirror turns toward him as well. The apparition is known as the Mirror Master. The Wayfarer draws his sword and stares into the hollow eyes of his foe with determination burning in his own. Not for an instant does he shift his gaze toward the mirrors. Taking a step toward the Mirror Master, it gestures around the shard with both hands, and the mirror piece starts rotating in several directions at once. Following the shard's movements, the entire room leans abruptly, making the Wayfarer lose his footing. He falls to the ceiling and the walls, shattering several mirrors. The glass fragments find their way into his armor and slice his skin as he tries to recover from the battering. The chamber suddenly stops, staying upside down, allowing the Wayfarer to stand up. The figure dissolves within a mirror and reappears out of another. The shard starts spinning once more. Hurt and exhausted, the Wayfarer braces himself. But to his surprise, the room remains still. Instead, all of the unshattered mirrors turn to face him, casting a blinding light upon him. Once his sight returns, the Wayfarer finds himself completely surrounded by a myriad of identical wraiths, ceaselessly spinning around him. His legs give out at that moment, and he almost falls to the floor, out of breath. He knows he could faint at any moment. The Wayfarer flings his sword toward them desperately to try and stop their dance. He succeeds in stabbing one figure, shattering them. The rest scatter as glass pieces fall to the floor. The Wayfarer is left surrounded by floating mirrors. One of them lies broken in front of him. With little strength left, the Wayfarer runs toward his sword and almost falls on it. With his hand almost touching the hilt, the Wayfarer hears a sinister whisper behind him.
Look,
He hears. He turns, eyes closed, gripping his sword to deliver a wide swing with it toward the voice. A faint sound of glass is heard shattering. The Wayfarer hesitantly opens his eyes. Before him, on the floor, lies the figure. Next to it, its severed hand and the mirror piece it was holding, broken. The Wayfarer may take them. The Wayfarer can only press onward. He finds himself in a chamber with dense air. Broom hides the floor. On the walls, hideous statues carrying small mirrors keep the darkness at bay with everlasting candles. The Wayfarer is now in the inner glass purgatory, which is composed of a grand tunnel that spirals downward to the lowest level of the purgatory. Whenever the invisible bell tolls, the walls of the inner purgatory tremble, and the fog rises until it covers everything, hindering the vision of those who are traversing the hallway. There are many powerful enemies that lurk in the corners of this plane, such as the demented bones with 3 heads that each have a mind of their own, with one of them taking complete control of the body whenever they detect an intruder, seeking to crush the intruder with their huge morning star. Another example are the living iron, who are forged from the iron of hundreds of magical weapons, whose armour is seemingly impenetrable. The Mist Phantom responds directly to the ring of the bell. It is a great warrior who seeks those who dare to enter the inner purgatory in order to give them a fate he once suffered. Bellborn are gargoyles that defend the Great Bell Tower. They camouflage among their inert kin while clinging to the tower's walls, waiting for the best moment to strike. If they cannot execute an ambush, they gather in small groups so they may overwhelm their victims. Their bites can cause petrification. The Tormented One is a twisted and defiled body of a once venerated knight, filled with straw and sticks. It changes locations when it is not being looked at. The Wayfarer pushes through the tunnel, crossing the haze as the view in front of him repeats in an endless cycle. Eventually he comes across an opening unlike the others, for a bright light emerges from it. When he reaches the entrance, he is amazed to find a tiny verdant grotto, bathed in a gentle light. In the centre of the haven, surrounded by moss, rests a small pond. The Wayfarer looks around. Tiny droplets of water fall on his helmet. He looks up, puzzled, and discovered that the grotto extends as far as he can see. Under the light drizzle, he approaches the pool to drink. However, the Wayfarer notices the liquid isn't water. It is opaque and metallic. He stares at his wavy reflection for a moment, then takes a step back and sits next to it. Standing over the pool is a statue of a woman. Her facial features eroded beyond recognition, and her eyes 2 small mirrors. In that unusual corner, under the gaze of the statue, the Wayfarer feels strangely at ease. He makes himself comfortable on the soft moss below him. His fingers sink into the moss, but he realizes he cannot feel it. Confused, he looks at his hand, and is horrified to discover that the curse has hardened his fingers and left them bony. He loses no time taking off his armour to check his condition. He observes his reflection in the pool, contemplating the devastating consequences of the curse, the punishment for his greed. The amaranthine markings have begun engulfing his face. His arm is now completely decrepit. He runs his fingers across the right side of his face, yet he feels nothing. The Wayfarer feels powerless against the curse, so he decides to lie down on the moss and let the hours fly by. Eventually, the comforting atmosphere of the room manages to calm his torment. His preoccupations are washed away by the gentle rain from above, and his fears dissolve into the soft mantle. With his gaze lost in the soft ripples of the pond, his eyelids grow heavy. A tiny yet interesting piece of information is shown here. All demons were gods once. It is man who puts crowns on our heads and holds axes over our necks. The Wayfarer dreams about a familiar place, the sanctuary of the snake, just outside the Chamber of Offerings. However, his surroundings are not exactly as he remembers them. The room is enveloped in gloom, a nauseating stench pervades the air, and the room is flooded with blood. A noise comes from ahead, the distinctive sounds of flesh being torn and bones being broken. The Wayfarer walks toward it. A headless man is piling up skulls, his head barely hanging on by a single strip of flesh. The creature raises its hand, pointing at the Wayfarer. He feels a sudden coldness slice through his neck. His vision blurs for an instant, then tilts, vertigo taking over as his head falls onto the floor. He awakens from his slumber, dizzy and agitated. The grotto is now dimly lit, and past the doorway ahead, darkness can only be seen. The light has died, and everything is shrouded in an eerie silence. He hears footsteps from beyond the entrance, fast approaching. The Wayfarer quickly stands and grips his sword, fixated on the dark. The footsteps stop abruptly. He stares into the pitch-black unknown, terrified. Words from the cavernous voice call the Wayfarer's name, talking like it has never spoken before.
I have a tongue black as coal. I have a crown made of bones. I will tear off your skin. I will feast on your entrails. I will gnaw on each bone. Nothing will be left, not even your soul.
The words made his heart beat faster. The Wayfarer's name was mentioned. It resonates in his head. He finds it so strangely familiar. So much time has gone by since he heard it that it might as well be in oblivion. But the moment he realises who the name belongs to, he freezes in terror. His legs give out and his hands start shaking. As the hours go by, the Wayfarer remains immobile, his blade pointing toward the darkness, waiting for the voice to reveal itself, but nothing happens. Finally, after what seems like an eternity, the candles outside the room come back to life. There is nothing outside. Warily, the Wayfarer stands up, ready to press on. He marches forward tirelessly, crossing a sea of fog and clashing his blade against some fearsome opponents. Many are the times he falls, yet he always gets back up, for the path must be walked. Among the ringing of the bell, the Wayfarer walks, tightly gripping his sword. He never stops, even though he cannot see past his helmet thanks to the fog. He feels in his guts that he is getting close to something important. He hears the tolls of the bell growing louder. Vibrations ripple through his body with each of them. His once downhearted footsteps have now turned into a hopeful march. Having been witness to the ever-changing nature of the purgatory, he is now sure that, unlike before, he is about to reach a place of significance. The ringing of the bell stops, and the thick fog slowly dissipates. The tunnel falls silent, barring the footsteps of the Wayfarer. Suddenly, though, he bumps into something and almost loses his balance. After what felt like an eternity walking in the same direction, the Wayfarer thinks that he has finally reached the end of the corridor. He reaches forward with his hand. Stone, no, a wall maybe. He feels it, searching for an exit of sorts, hoping that by venturing deeper into the glass purgatory is the way to escape it. Then the fog clears enough to reveal a hooded figure. A large statue holds a scepter in one hand and a looking glass in the other. Its face is horribly disfigured. Once the broom is completely gone, the Wayfarer finds himself in an embellished circular chamber, surrounded by strange statues. Noticing an exit on the far side of the room, he rushes toward it. It leads to a dark mirror of sorts. The Wayfarer knows not to look, and so averts his gaze from it. He has learned not to look at them for too long, for he is convinced that they reflect nothing but lies. They try to instill fear and confusion in those who set their eyes on them. Back in that tiny room, his hopes shattered with the glass. He felt his freedom slipping away between his fingers and taken away from him. Yet despair turned into resolve to truly escape his ordeal. He defied the fate set upon him by this accursed place. After looking for alternate exits and coming up with nothing, the Wayfarer musters the courage to face the mirror. He realises that the mirror does not reflect his surroundings at all. He simply sees himself, standing alone amid darkness. He contemplates himself, ready to confront whatever the mirror shows him next. Yet, it seems that nothing else changes or comes to fruition. He sees only himself. The Wayfarer touches the mirror. Against his fingers, the glass ripples. He slowly and willingly sinks inside it, a cold feeling overcoming him. The Wayfarer realizes that he has crossed the gate to another world. Amid an ever-present sea of fog, an imposing massive tower looms over everything, its terrifying presence akin to that of a slumbering giant, whose awakening seems utterly inevitable. A cold dampness hangs in the air, and an untraceable zephyr dances with the broom. Walking the misty dunes toward the stone behemoth, the Wayfarer stumbles across a grim scene. The fog flows around dozens of small, stone-like decapitated bodies. Some of them dismembered, they look almost human. Realizing that he is not alone, the Wayfarer glances around but sees nothing lurking in the fog. Avoiding the bodies, he leaves them behind with one disturbing thought.
Their heads, they were nowhere to be found.
A shiver runs over him as he reaches the moors of the tower. Utter darkness awaits him beyond. Specks of fire from his torch float down into the darkness, the ever-growing abyss growing underneath him. Every step could be his last as he ascends a square-shaped spiral staircase. The walls tremble around him, and stone debris falls from the stairs above as metallic wails echo in the distance. Then, the strident knell of the bell arrives. Rumbling like thunder, a piercing pain runs through the Wayfarer's ears. He soon comes back to his senses when a strong gust of wind carrying debris hits him, making him lose his balance and snuffing out his torch. More wind blasts come one after another, but they soon stop with the last toll of the bell. The Wayfarer luckily has the amber torch, and uses it to light his way. The bell rings here and there. Its deafening sounds are almost always accompanied by the fierce winds. The higher he ascends, the harder it becomes to fight against their strikes. Every time he hears the bell's prelude, he lies down and clutches onto the stairs with all his might. His ears ring and his legs keep giving out, yet nothing seems to break his will. Despite not seeing the end of the stairs, he ventures onward, as he always does. Approaching the zenith of the tower, the Wayfarer notices that the bell is about to strike once again. The winds bring a familiar smell to the Wayfarer, the smell of death. After the bell stops, a decapitated body falls from above, smashing against the steps in front of the Wayfarer and making him jump. Moving closer, he realizes that the corpse seems to be imbued with darkness. Even with the staff casting its light on it, it remains dim. By the time the Wayfarer reaches the top, the bell stops. But a strange noise replaces it. The sound of flesh tearing and bones cracking. Like the smell, this is familiar to him. With his heart beating faster and faster, he arrives at the belfry. The Wayfarer's heart skips when he sees a macabre scene right out of his nightmares. A creature with purple skin crouches on a pile of massacred bodies, clutching one of their heads in its bony hands. The corpse's wounds are brutal, as if they had fought the beast. Their air is thick with the smell of blood. The Wayfarer's hand trembles ever so slightly as he reaches for his sword. As he approaches, the creature rises, revealing the extent of his injuries. Ripped muscle tissue and bones that poke out of his severed neck. Despite this, though, it stands. The Wayfarer is shocked to discover that the head that the creature holds is its own. His lifeless visage stares at him as the creature lifts it over his shoulders and places it on his neck. It stays in place for a few seconds before falling and rolling to the Wayfarer's feet. The Wayfarer moves his attention to the helmeted heads across the floor. Their unsettling features are familiar to him. They are the metallic faces that plagued his nightmares, and infused fear in him. He is still stupefied at the eerie scene when the headless being turns toward him and picks up a long and rusty sword from the floor, no doubt belonging to one of his victims. The monster moves erratically and its attacks are weak and predictable. When it raises its sword to strike, the Wayfarer takes the chance to stab its torso. It doesn't even flinch, even letting the sword sink deeper as it tries to grab the Wayfarer's head. Its leathery fingers lock around his throat, and the Wayfarer struggles trying to move away from the abomination. Even though it lacks the strength to strangle him, its touch disturbs him greatly. It soon gets a hold of the Wayfarer's head with both hands, twisting and pulling on it with all its might. The Wayfarer is sickened by the repulsive sight of the being. Its lumpy skin is covered with wounds. It does not bleed or seem to feel pain, yet its veins pulse as if it were alive. The Wayfarer lets go of his sword and pushes the monster to the floor. It lies inert. He moves to it and tries to finish it off, but it moves at the last second, causing one of its hands to be sliced off instead. After stepping back a safe distance, the Wayfarer stares at the pathetic being. The longer he observes it, the more he sees the crude reality.
This broken body is none but my own.
A gentle breeze blows. Pearly rivers of mist flow throughout the sky. A dark will slowly vanishes in silence. The purple that taunts his butchered body dissipates into nothingness. He feels the beating of his heart. Relief, coldness, pain. His many wounds start bleeding. From his wrist flows a stream of red. The Wayfarer falls to the floor. Kneeling in a puddle of blood, the Wayfarer stares at the body he has left behind. Without a head, it is but armour. He looks down at the blood below him, at his scarlet self. A sincere face stares back at him.
This is just me.
A single toll is heard. An illusion shatters. A man awakens. He contemplates his reflection, withered before the mirror that started it all. Dizzy, he stares with both eyes at his starved visage. His lips are cracked, his eyes sunken, and his skin greyish and dry. He barely has the strength to lift his numb arms off the floor. They feel as if they were made of stone. Where before was the mark of a curse, now there is not even a vestige of its existence. His many mortal wounds are equally gone. He is seemingly cured. He bathes in the serenity of that remote place, feeling unburdened. The toll of the bell still resonates in his head. The man closes his eyes, sinking into his thoughts. There are no gods, no monsters, no shadows, no mirrors, only warm darkness. Okay, turning off my narration voice a little bit, let's get into the analysis. So Vermis is a lot. Ahead are the ways I personally depict Vermis as a medium and a game, but there is also a lot of spitballing, especially when it comes to the lore and narrative of both books. Vermis II, despite being a sort of sequel to the first book, is very different in presentation. Vermis I is presented as a guidebook for an open-world dark fantasy RPG. Meanwhile, the second book, whilst having connotations of a video game guide, is much more focused on a narrative. This narrative, as we know, is about a predefined character's journey. Vermis I had the main character be, well, created by a hypothetical player, hence why I used we when I was talking about that book. Because we created the character, and well, I was guiding you through the book, so yeah. Vermis II, though, does a lot more world building than Vermis I, and I feel like, overall, it is superior to the first book in both art and as an experience, but it is mighty close between the two. Vermis I has a better atmosphere in my eyes, but both books are fantastic at what they were made for. From this observation alone, it should be obvious that I have a lot more to say about Vermis II than Vermis I. Both because of the narrative, but also because of the plethora of lore in Vermis II. But let's take a step back and approach the books one at a time, and talk about Vermis I first. Vermis I is presented as a somewhat open-world dark fantasy story, based in a world that has an area-to-area structure. Because of the way Vermis II is presented, I am going to confidently say that Vermis I is more open than its sequel, even if it is still kind of linear. This is because Vermis II doesn't really go out of its way to mention loot or alternate options such as Vermis I. Anyway, Vermis I is sometimes described to be Dark Souls 4. I think this mostly makes sense considering the character creation process, overall tone, and the purposely vague storytelling. It is, in almost every sense, a younger paper brother of those games. But if you've been paying attention so far, you should know this, presuming you are also aware of the Dark Souls series. You know, one of the most celebrated game series of all time that helped birth an entire subgenre. Despite Dark Souls being in third person though, I actually see Vermis I and II to work as a third and first person experience. Although I think the many inclusion of mirrors in the second book will work much better in first person. Another game that I want to mention is an indie game called Northern Journey. Northern Journey was created by Øystein Pedersen. I'm sorry if I butchered that. A Norwegian developer whose game is among the most atmospheric I've ever laid my hands on. The content of that game isn't as dark as Vermis, but the graphical style, sound design, music, and pretty much everything beside the story and age rating is what I think Vermis would be like as a game. Vermis I is also largely based in a forest, as is Northern Journey. The tweeting of birds, the whistling of winds, and the crunchy footsteps alongside the serene music is what I expect Vermis I's atmosphere to be like almost identically. Now that I've mentioned music, Vermis I and II will, in my eyes, heavily incorporate a genre called dungeon synth. It is a subgenre of a split from black metal that focuses on the heavily atmospheric interlude tracks of the albums that belong to that genre. This video has actually been using music belonging to it here and there. Again, links to the music I've used are in the description. The genre leaks atmosphere like no other, especially in a fantastical setting, both dark and high. Vermis is, of course, a dark fantasy setting thanks to the large amount of violence and mature themes, such as sanity. High fantasy, for example, are settings such as The Lord of the Rings, Elric of Melniboné, or Brandon Sanderson's main works. Vermis is a story of grand adventure, or as the title of this video states, venture. Venture and adventure, contrary to some people's belief, are different things. Venture is simply a dangerous undertaking or just an adventure that is dangerous. Vermis I is based in the northern section of the world. The capital is in a state of constant war and the world outside of it, whilst filled with serenity, is still very dangerous. It is filled with curses, dangerous creatures and magic. Despite this, though, Vermis in general is a very human story. One of the first people we encounter in the book is a knight who, well, is so filled with sorrow that he will let the player hit him endlessly without fighting back. To me, this character also acts as a sort of test dummy for the player. Off the top of my head, the closest thing to this character is that one guy in Sekiro that lets the main character, Wolf, practice against him over and over, even if he dies, as he, well, cannot actually die. He will simply resurrect to allow the player to continuously practice combos. So what is the story of the first book even about? Well, on my first read I had a few ideas, but to say there is a defined, true narrative here just isn't true. It is written to be presumed, theorized and talked about, you know, just like how I am right now. As I said in my synopsis of the book, it seems the entire set of the first book, at first glance, were dreamed by the skeletal figure, who dreamed of what they could have been while staring into the well. We see this skeleton at the start of the book, and only return to them at the very end, sandwiching the entire book between the two appearances. To me, this is intentional. Each class is a potential life the skeleton could have lived. I don't believe the skeleton made up the world, though. I simply think that they were a denizen of the world of Vermis. Hence why Vermis II takes place in the same world, just southward of where the first book takes place. A central theme of both books is death and potential. We see constant mentions of regret and reminiscence, mostly in Vermis II, and of course the world of Vermis is filled with death. I mean hell, the most dedicated Gailac servants and the Wandering Angel class of Vermis I decapitate not just others but even themselves for their divinity. Metal as hell, but also a statement as to how far the world has gone. Or this has just always been the state of the world. The world of Vermis I could be presumed to be in a state of turmoil thanks to the wars in the capital, which is the one place with the most human activity seemingly in the entire land. I don't consider it to be a post-apocalypse though. Like I said, this might just be how the world has always been. It's just a little worse because of the war. We know there is at least a base amount of cruelty of this world because Vermis II isn't based in this land affected by a nearby war and is still filled with zealots, curses and otherworldly eldritch threats and death. Vermis I doesn't have a defined narrative, as stated. That being, its story isn't a conventional one with a clear goal. Some compare Vermis to Dark Souls, as mentioned, but what it isn't like those games is in its story. In Dark Souls there is at least a clear goal of some sort, even if it is kind of vague. In Vermis, meanwhile, we don't know what our goal is at all. The book even acknowledges this when we venture into the Highlands by having us openly question what exactly our journey has been for. This, though, is all intentional. I think Vermis as a book was written to be both a simple appreciation of atmosphere and dark fantasy, but also as a huge source of inspiration. The reason I don't really have much to say about Vermis I's story is, well, because of the lack of it. As I mentioned though, there are strong themes through the world building. There are countless theories one could come up with, and many are posted online as well as plenty of pieces of analysis. Vermis's world is incredibly lonely. The people we meet are either untrustworthy, under a spell of sorts, suicidal, or just straight up dying. The most trusting figure, to me, is the man in the hummingbird armour on the outskirts of the Silver Swamps, who of course gives us a means to push back against the curse in this swamp. Even then though, his help didn't do much as we succumbed to the sleep either way. The man outside the ruin who seeks the box with the ring inside seems to be stable but injured, but it turns out he wished to set himself on fire. Well, to me it seemed intentional. This enigmatic encounter is, in my eyes, the most defining example of what Vermis I is like. It is filled with a dangerous adventure, false hope, and, eventually, death. A more literal example of depressing themes is the first ever NPC we meet in Vermis, which of course is the knight who refuses to hit you back. His defeat is an emotional one. Ignoring the gameplay mechanic to this that I've already mentioned, the idea of a man who will not defend himself no matter what pain he goes through is both insane and incredibly depressing. One of the final points here I want to make is about the slogan of the book. Which flesh is your flesh? Quite an enigmatic question, but I believe it is just simply asking you, as the player, what sort of person you are. And the player is of course represented by the skeleton from the beginning and the end of the book. So yeah, To me, Vermis I's narrative, or lack thereof, is about identity. It is about someone, being the skeleton, who wishes of better times or regrets the way they spent their life, and so fantasizes about what they could have been. Or it's just a dark fantasy setting with nothing else to it. Before we get into Vermis II, I want to quickly talk about the movie called Aguirre, the Wrath of God. I promise this is relevant, just bear with me because I watched this movie during the production of this video and it heavily reminded me of the story of Vermis II because, as we know, Vermis II actually has a pretty concrete narrative, unlike the first book. Aguirre, the Wrath of God is a movie directed by Werner Herzog and features one of the most infamous actors of all time, Klaus Kinski. Their story and relationship on its own is insane, especially during this movie, but it's not what this video is about, so let's talk about the movie itself. It follows a group of Spanish conquistadors in an expedition through South America, who seek El Dorado, a mythical city made up by the natives in the land. Soon they give up, but most of the group usurp, and from here the expedition is led by Aguirre. From here, the group ventures mindlessly, and to cut things very short, insanity ensues and so does fever and starvation. And every single member of the expedition dies, barring Aguirre himself, who dreams of an impossible conquest headed by an empire founded by him. No matter what they did, they were doomed from the start when they wanted to find El Dorado, because it simply does not exist. The reason they usurped, after all, was because they believed it existed. I bring this movie up because the premise here, mixed with the serene atmosphere, heavily reminds me of Vermis II and I, and my approach to the atmosphere is inspired by, well, old school RPGs and fantasy movies, but especially this movie. Vermis II, at the end of the day, is a story of tragedy and about a search for something impossible, just like Aguirre. The Wayfarer is cursed, and even as someone who is a servant of an objectively evil god, he shows his worry and despair. He isn't without his humanity, despite the evil acts he must have done to gain his god's favour. No matter what though, he was cursed, and seemingly no cure was in sight. He was seemingly trying to find something that doesn't exist at all. It also contains major themes of alternate selves, which may be obvious if you've been listening up until now. Throughout his journey, the Wayfarer encounters people who, at closer glance, reflect his own self through their personality, condition, or appearance. Of course, we have his reflections, but there is one such character at the very end of the book which is pretty much stated to be the Wayfarer, the Godless Servant. After the Wayfarer's fight with the Godless Servant, we seemingly switch point of views to the Godless Servant itself, who actually was the Wayfarer. The Godless Servant, as the name implies, is no longer a servant of a god. The Wayfarer describes himself as a servant of Gailac, and this pretty much means that the Godless Servant is the Wayfarer without an allegiance to Gailac. His missing head, too, is a reference to Gailac's followers, including the Bone Hunters, whom the Wayfarer was a part of. This could mean many things, but one thing that also catches my eye is that the Godless Servant wants a new head. Perhaps a rejection of this divine act of decapitating himself, which we know is what the most dedicated Gailac servants do. That's my theory though. I would say I might be overthinking, but I had a comment on the Godhusk video stating that these books are made to be thought about and, hell, even overthought about, which I agree with. The Wayfarer has always had doubt when it comes to his allegiance to Gailac. When he sees the green of the forest for the first time, he thinks about another life, where he wasn't a servant of him at all. He isn't a completely lost soul to this objectively evil god. He is pretty self-aware and confused about his own nature, especially since he was facing certain death in the form of a curse. Perhaps he is afraid of not losing his life, but of what may come after. The afterlife of Vermis isn't really talked about. Hell, some of the gods are straight up pagan in nature. But if the Wayfarer was weighed morally, he is going into the deepest pits of hell. Another thing about him is his obvious guilt. He is haunted by the souls of people he has killed, which he refers to as shadows. By the end, he is confronted by the heads of those he killed as they surround the Godless Servant. Another interpretation is that the Godless Servant is the result of the Wayfarer at his worst. His faith in Gailac making him delve into zealotry to the point where he decapitates his own head. So there was something I purposely left out at the very end of Vermis II, a character creation. A curious part of Vermis II is that, whilst there is a defined character we see the story from, being the Wayfarer, at the very end of the book there is a character creation. I left it out because it does come out of left field and I would rather discuss it when it is relevant, which is now. In Vermis II, there are a total of 8 classes, and they vary heavily. They also have the same 4 stats that the Vermis I classes had, being mind, will, faith and strength. Each class has their own lore, just like the ones from Vermis I, allowing writers or creators to create their own characters based on these classes. But what is the point of these classes in Vermis II if we've, well, already seen the story of the Wayfarer and not a created character? Well, it isn't known because we're meant to come up with that ourselves. What we are told in the book itself is that the path has been walked, now walk theirs, referring to the classes. This most likely refers to the fact that the Wayfarer's story is now finished, and another will begin, and that story is something only we decide. I've heard theories that the character creation at the end of Vermis II is for the unreleased and, at the time of writing, unannounced Vermis III. I don't think this is true though. Firstly, this theory has no basis at all, which means that even as a theory it doesn't have much to stand on. But also because throughout Vermis II we are told about locations the Wayfarer simply doesn't visit. Here is my interpretation. The events of Vermis II act as a sort of prologue or story mode, and then character creation is the first step into the open world or free roam. It is a long prologue, yes, but one nonetheless. If you think about Vermis II from the point of view of a linear game rather than a book, then it is quite short. This takes into account sidetracking and general exploration within these zones the game is based in. There is plenty of exploration in the book, of course, but there are also areas that are skimmed over, such as the solstices and the towers in the woods with the devotees inside of them. We are told about them, but nothing specific, allowing us to come up with these things ourselves. Unlike Godhusk, Vermis doesn't contain multiple endings. A solid way of approaching these sort of books is to talk about the endings of them, since they typically are related to the most relevant lore. But because Vermis lacks this, the 2 books are much harder to talk about. Either way, I would love to hear your interpretation of these things in the comments. Theory making and spitballing are very fun and creative activities. Also, a lot of my audience tend to come up with great takes and theories on the games and topics I go over, so I look forward to your views. Alright, so I've said what I want to say about Vermis. With this video, I end my duology on Plasterbu's 2 most noted works, Godhusk and Vermis. Again, if you can support the releases, be sure to do so. Going back to my point in the beginning of the video, Vermis is a genuine work of art within the genre that suffers from sameness, not just within its world building but also in its artistry. I believe the technique Plasterbu uses is called hatching, which gives texture to the art in his book. It almost looks like it's a parchment found in an old dungeon somewhere. I am also going to use this little bit at the end of the video to address some comments in the Godhusk video. Many people were saying things along the tone of, if make book, why not make game? I'm not sure if these people are being purposely obtuse or plain disingenuous, but making a book obviously costs less resources than a game. That, and I believe that these books for games that don't exist use their platform to their advantage. The vague storytelling and the extremely detailed art, for one, serves as a way to use these books for inspiration for other works. Plasterbu, as we know by now, is a master of art, and so he simply uses what he is good at to create something bigger. A game that isn't a game because, well, he simply doesn't have the resources to do so. But instead of throwing a tantrum and blaming the industry, he knuckles down and does it with what he has. That is my interpretation of why these exist, at least. It could simply be that he wanted to make something akin to the old adventure books that rarely exist anymore, but lean more heavily into the video game guide aesthetic. The end of this video also marks the end of these 2 shorter, sorry, to me 2 hours is short on my videos, I'm not saying that to buff myself up, it genuinely is, video essays about Plasterbu's works. The next video is going to be another monolithic one, meaning a video about a game that I've been wanting to cover for a very long time. In fact, it might be 2 games in one video, but I don't know, we'll see. As usual, like and subscribe if you enjoyed, follow the Twitter and join the Discord too if you wish. Thanks for watching and stay safe. Thank you to the supporters in the shoutout tiers: Worm, Times, Alex T, Carl Essinger, Hero, Vodes, Resgorilla, Simeon, Moon Goddesses, Faba, Colin, Krieg 1212, Wostan, Vito Paniero, Operation Error, Laloa, Handsome Sun, Halusi, Courage, Jaden, Yellow Forest, Corrupto, End Lifer, Honest Heart, Whitemane, Ban, 049, Derek, C1, The Salesman, Envy of Light, Band of Infinity, Calypso, Spider, Ashley, Vero, Trinity, Charcoal Eater, Jack, Reaper, Cole Smith, Random Name Here, Jordan, and Jason Bolton.